I'd like to call this meeting to order at 4:02 p.m. on Wednesday, July 16th, 2025. And Nancy, can you do the roll call?
Emily Dale, Alicia Hayes,
Present.
Abby Buckham,
Present.
Jesse Dominguez, Amy Horn,
Present.
Duffy Westheimer,
Present.
Bernadette Burcham.
Present.
Thank you.
Miss Mike. Yeah. Notice of option. I'm going to read the notice of option to recess into an executive session. Pursuant to ARS Section 38-431-02, notice is hereby given to the members of the Heritage Preservation Commission and to the general public that at this regular meeting, the Heritage Preservation Commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public for legal advice and discussion with the city's attorney for legal advice on any item listed on the following agenda pursuant to ARS Section 38-431-03A3. And now, would anyone like to volunteer to do the land acknowledgement?
Yeah, I'll do it. The Heritage Preservation Commission humbly acknowledges the ancestral homelands of this area's indigenous nations and original stewards. These lands, still inhabited by native descendants, border mountains sacred to indigenous peoples. We honor them, their legacies, their traditions, and their continued contributions. We celebrate their past, present, and future generations who will forever know this place as home.
Thank you, Amy. And I will also read the public comment section. At this time, any member of the public may address the commission on any subject within their jurisdiction that is not scheduled before the commission on this day. Due to open meeting laws, the commission cannot discuss or act on items presented during the portion of the agenda. To address the commission on an item that is on the agenda, please wait for the chair to call for public comment at this time and the item is to heard. And did I do that correctly, Sarah? Thank you. Yes.
Is there public comment on this item or now, Nancy, or is it a later item? Okay.
Is it 2 minutes that each person has?
Nancy will start the timer from over here as the people coming up for public comments say their name and address. And I was just buying her a little time so she could go back to her seat.
Perfect. And those who don't know, I'm acting in place for Emily Dale. This is my first time, so I'm going to be asking if I'm doing this correctly.
Button, how exciting. Okay, my name is Charlie Silver, and I just want to convey to the commission how much I appreciate your work, and also that I want to see more heritage preservation for our town, not less. Thank you. And that was hardly worth starting the timer for, huh, Nancy?
Thank you. And Nancy, do I read the note that you gave me?
Those are just for you to call up people by name if they've turned in that they want to comment on an item. So she'll hand those to you and you can call them if there's like more than one person because we have some people today. I know that's not always typical for this commission, but yeah.
I think this is the first time I've seen a card. So we have a speaker request from Anthony Garcia, a council member Garcia. Would you like to come up and speak?
It was for the for a topic that's on the agenda, so we'll have to wait until that time comes. I just couldn't figure out where it was on the agenda, so I just kind of hand wrote in what I thought the agenda topic was. So you can call me back up when that item comes up, and that's for the old city hall.
I will call you back up. It's like the button sticks a little bit, so I keep having to push it. Sorry. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the regular meeting on Wednesday, May 21st. Commissioner Westheimer?
Yeah, I found for item of 417 East Birch, it says cardboard siding and it should be clapboard siding.
Did you say cardboard? Oh, okay.
It says cardboard. I don't know if AI does this, but it should be clapboard siding.
Yeah, that sounds like an autocorrect issue. Thank you.
That sounds like spell check. It sounds like something I would do. Is there any other comments about the minutes from the May meeting? Well, with those revisions and to change that to clapboard siding, would someone like to make a motion to approve the May meetings?
I move to approve the May meetings with the correction by Commissioner Westheimer.
Would anyone like to second?
I'll second
I
that.
second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays?
And then ask for abstentions.
Any abstentions? All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next item, which is the property at 123 South Beaver Street, and it's a grant application. And do we have a presentation?
No, unfortunately, this is an item that was tabled from last month when the meeting was canceled due to lack of quorum, and the applicant is unable to be here this month and apologizes. But I have communicated with him a little bit about the project, so I'm happy to try and answer any specific questions you have, and I can pull up all of the application materials and go over anything you'd like to review. But essentially, this is a level 1, which is a $10,000 Historic Signs and Facades grant application for window replacement at the Flagstaff Christian Fellowship at 123 South Beaver Street. And this building is individually listed in the National Register of Historic Places, as well as being a contributor to the Flagstaff Southside Historic District. And I can pull up some of their materials here to view. So this is a shot of some historic photos that they included with their application of the windows. And so some of the yellow sort of textured glass lights that you see here were what the windows had throughout originally. They were all this yellow textured but as they've been broken over time and to allow more light into their sanctuary, they have, some of them have already been replaced with clear glass, but otherwise that's the only modifications to date. They are finding that they're unable to continue to source that yellow glass material, which has happened, as you can imagine, prominent location downtown, subject to vandalism. They've unfortunately had to replace quite a few of these over time, and the last time they reported that they're sort of at the end of their rope, with at the end of their options for sourcing the glass, and were unable to do so. They're also having issues with This doesn't, let's see, show it, but if you're familiar with the building, it has a very steep roof with extremely shallow eaves. And so because of that, they get a lot of water directly coming into the windows. And so the window fabric has deteriorated. It's also caused swelling and other things. So the windows are no longer all operable. And so they've determined that at this point, they can't repair them any further and it's time to replace them. And so they've been looking at different replacement options, and they have, reached out to me and to others to, see what they can do. And they're trying to replace them as closely as possible. So they're still, like it's dual pane as a modern upgrade, and it will all be clear glass. But for the most part, they're keeping the wood material. They'll keep the same light pattern, the same paint color. And the other major change with the window is that the style of the window now is that these larger ones, they open just these 6 lights in the middle open out as like this hopper style. And they aren't able to find a vendor who can recreate that. And they were told that the closest they could get would be 3 different windows. So like fixed lights, one that that opened that way and then another fixed one. But because of 3 different windows, then they would have, larger gaps between the different windows, which would end up looking even further away from the original. So they're switching from this hopper style to a casement style. So that's essentially the summary of the changes. But they have tried to do their due diligence to maintain as much of the historic appearance as possible with those specific notes. And they, I believe, applied for a level 1 instead of a level 2, knowing that because it's not an exact replacement, they didn't go for the level 2 $20,000 grant. They went for the level 1 with those allowances that they weren't able to do a complete replacement, which would probably have to be custom fabricated, each window individually, and prohibitively expensive. So, any specific questions about the project or the grant application? As I'm sure you're aware, we've just started a new fiscal year, so we have sufficient grant funds to award. We have $140,000 remaining to award this year. Yeah.
I went and looked at it. They look like they're metal windows, not wood, and they're going to replace with wood. Is that correct? And if
No, they're wood now. Yeah,
Ah,
they're
I don't
should-
think so.
planning
But
to replace in kind.
are they going to be wood clad or just wood?
From the plans they're showing, yeah, that they're actual wooden windows. They're not, something else with cladding on top. And they're actually still divided lights, which is also unique. I mean, instead of most things we're seeing now, the divisions are fake. So with the wood just outside, but these are actual divided light wooden windows.
So is it maybe that the window sill was wood and that maybe, because I'm wondering how would the mechanism of the window opening, which I didn't notice when I was going through the package, be wood? Is that part maybe metal? Is that what you thought, Duffy?
And maybe, yeah, some of that is cased in metal is the difference in that. Definitely, I'm sure that operating apparatus is metal.
And then maybe it's the outer part of the window, the sill and whatnot, maybe that's wood.
I don't think so because it's so thin that I think it would be hard to make wood last when it's so thin. But I didn't go up and scratch it or anything because I didn't want them to get mad at me. It doesn't matter. It is what they're requesting is what they're requesting.
Any other questions? So actually, I have a question. So now that they're going to be casement, I'm not an architectural historian or an architect. This would mean that they're crank windows to open, like.
Yeah. So they are. It is a different opening style.
But with the windows closed, which I imagine that they're generally closed,
Yes.
then it would pretty much look pretty much replacement in kind. It's really going to be
Yes.
when the windows are opened.
Correct. Yes, that will be the major difference.
Okay.
Yeah, so instead of opening like this, they're gonna open like that.
Lauren, do you know if they're going to open in or out?
I don't, I'd have to go look through. I assume out, based on what's there now, but
I think that's usually how that hardware works,
Right.
that it has to go out.
exactly right. Like, because as you
Yeah, I
mentioned,
don't
you
know.
crank it from the inside.
Yeah, it's usually a hand crank and a little, yeah. So I have to ask a process question. Do I need to ask if anyone wants to make a motion?
Yes.
Everyone,
Yeah, I mean,
stay with me while I'm learning. Would anyone like to make a motion on the item of the property at 123 South Beaver Street for a grant application?
I will motion to approve a level 1 historic signs and facade grant application for the window replacement at 123 South Beaver.
I second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Sounds like the motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the property at 19 West Birch Avenue at the Phase 1 Cultural Resource Study, and we do have a presentation, correct?
yes, but I believe we should start with public comment before
Yeah.
we go into the item.
We have a request for Councilman Anthony Garcia to make a public comment.
Well, I do appreciate the acknowledgement as a council person, because that's a role that I do serve here at the city. I am not here as a council person, nor do I represent anything that the council feels about this issue. I'm simply here as a citizen of Flagstaff, multiple generations. My family goes back, and I'm kind of here speaking for those that have multiple generation families in the area when it comes to historical preservation of all buildings, which, in my opinion, should also include the one that we're speaking about now, because that's the constituency I spoke to when I went out and did my my consulting with the community on this project. I could be completely off base with this because I can only study what I can study. But my understanding is that the property owner and the folks that want to go through with the building are also the people that hired the consultant. If there is any truth to that, it seems a little offbeat when it comes to ethics. Because obviously, if you're hiring somebody, they're going to give you the product that you hired them to give you. If there is any way to change this in the future as a form of process, I think that's something that this commission should study with the staff. So that way the commission's reflection of the community coincides with the process of the staff, if that's a possibility. Beyond that, I look at the alternative actions, and when I look at the first one, the commission could request modification to study or proposed mitigation measures that include as a condition of approval. That would be a condition that I would support, and that is hire a firm. Don't have the property that owner hire the firm, but have an outside ethical source come in and do the study. Those might be pie in the sky ideas, I realize that. So getting more to the attainable, if what's going to happen in the end is demolition of this building, well, I offer and ask the property owners to consider potentially at least keeping the facade of the building on the San Francisco side and on the Birch side of the street, and working your development with that facade, because folks that have been here their whole lives, like myself, multiple generations, the history of this town, the culture of this town, is wanting really bad to hold on to what we see as a representation of our past, under the belief that if we don't remember where we came from, we're going to have a hard time figuring out where we're going. So if that developer is listening to me, one citizen who has been in Flagstaff his whole life, I will hope that they think about and consider adding the facade, leaving the bones or what we see, what connects this building to Flagstaff up, and then building your design within that. Because I understand that progress needs to happen, and the hotel needs to be built. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Anthony Garcia? I have a question just for clarification. You said San Francisco Street. Did you mean Beaver Street? So are you suggesting that the facades on Birch and Beaver be retained within and within the new building? Is that what you're saying? Like to keep part of that building in the new hotel?
Yeah.
Or am I assuming that's what you meant?
No, that's exactly what I meant. And I could have gotten the streets wrong. It's funny because I've lived here my whole life and I could tell you how to get anywhere in this town, but I can't do it with streets.
I know
which is-
exactly
which-
what you
which
mean.
is
I'll say
odd.
like,
But yeah, what you see on the exterior of the building, that would be wonderful if that could be included into the design on the forward-facing streets from the outside as an homage to what Flagstaff really is as a community. I've heard murmurs of things like labeling it NAU, which NAU is a very close community partner, but that's not Flagstaff. Flagstaff is Flagstaff, and that building represents what Flagstaff is, was, and should be for the future. Thank you.
so do we just note that for the record?
Commissioner Buckham has a question online.
My question is not specifically for Mr. Garcia, but more of a question about a comment he made. Am I allowed to do that now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay.
Commissioner Buckham.
Based on my understanding or perhaps assumption from the last time we discussed this item, the decision to demolition is out of our hands, correct? Like it's going to happen?
Let me address that. I'm going to do a quick intro before I turn the floor over to Cornerstone, who is here to
Thank
talk
you.
about the revisions that they've made to the report. So we're back to review a revised phase 1 study based on the commission's motion from the last meeting, which was to reevaluate under 2 Flagstaff Register of Historic Places criteria and do additional research in some specific areas that the commission highlighted in the motion. In addition to that, a citizen reached out to the State Historic Preservation Office for a National Register eligibility determination and forwarded the previous version of the report to the State Historic Preservation Office as well. And so Cornerstone is also going to talk about reevaluating at the National Register level, in addition to the specific request from the Commission to reevaluate at the Flagstaff Register level. And we've also invited Bill Collins from the SHPO's office, who provided additional guidance here in case you have further questions about that. And to get to what you specifically asked, Commissioner Buckham. So yes, tonight we are here to talk about the revised report. So the options are to, accept the phase 1 and the revised findings, or to ask for additional research or documentation to be done to meet the phase 1 standards. And then because the findings have changed in the report, and the report now finds that the building is a significant cultural resource under our code, that means that for the proposed demolition, now the commission also is going to be reviewing and selecting mitigation measures for the demolition. So those are the things that you'll be reviewing and voting on this evening. And so, but procedurally, although you are, yes, Commissioner Buckham, talking about the mitigation measures for proposed demolition tonight, because that is a requirement of a phase 1 cultural resource study, is it identifies major impacts, which of course demolition would be, and it has to propose mitigation. That's why it's being done now with the phase 1. This building is in the downtown historic overlay zone, which does mean that development, including demolition, has to follow the certificate process. And that approval is not before you tonight. That will be coming back for commission review later. So that would be a certificate talking about the demolition. And of course, you'll also need to review the new design for a certificate of appropriateness. But as I mentioned in the staff report, we have not received site plans with elevations for staff review yet. So we don't have those ready to show the commission to see whether or not they meet the design guidelines for the downtown overlay zone. And yes, Commissioner Horn.
I just had a couple other process questions. So what are the other steps for approval of demolition before it gets to us? And then when we look at the certificate of appropriateness, can you just remind me, do we look at mitigation measures again there, or is it just at this step? If you could remind me of process.
Yeah, so this is the main step. So, and as part of what you're deciding tonight, you could, for example, ask for something to be incorporated into the new design. And Cornerstone will discuss that as one of their proposed mitigation measures. They proposed incorporating some of the existing stone into like a keystone monument of the new design. And that could be something that you approve, subject to seeing it and approving the final design when it comes here for the certificate of appropriateness. But for the most part, you are selecting the mitigation measures now, and they won't have an opportunity to re-review them later. Yeah, unless it's something like that that's to be subject to approval later on, which you would have to structure the motion to say, we are, requesting, if you're requesting a phase 2 report or measured drawings, that would be another one where it's like subject to the HPO's approval or subject, you want it to come back to the commission to review and approve. So that sort of thing. And then in terms of, sure.
Hi, so Sarah, Prince of a Neighbor Plan Manager. I just want to add a quick thought about that the way I might simplify, I know we're talking very specifically about the code, but what you approve with the report is basically the checklist and then you can decide what on the checklist is part of the certificate of appropriateness and what is maybe things that Lauren might approve administratively. So for example, with the phase 2 cultural resource study for the David Babbitt House, which is another significant local historic resource that has been through a phase 2 and a phase 1 process. There was portions of that where the commission said, we need to look at that. We have to see that for approval. And there were parts of it that they said, like the salvage plan, and they said, salvage these items and the HPO can approve the salvage plan. So just bear that in mind as you're thinking through when you're looking at the mitigation and when you want to consider how you phrase a motion. Is there may be things you're like, we want to see that as part of the certificate of appropriateness, or that can be something that later on post site plan approval, which the certificate of appropriateness and the site plan are tied together very tightly. Though one is administrative and one is done here at the commission level. What is it, the things that Lauren can approve at the site plan and that's all the approval it gets? Or approve with some later building a permit and that's fine, versus things you want to make sure are shown on the plans you get to see as part of the certificate. Does that make sense? So here today you make the checklist, and as you're making the checklist, what comes back to the commission, what's administrative is part of how you might design that motion. Is that a good follow-up? I'm trying to take what Lauren was saying and make it as functional as possible from a procedure standpoint.
And in terms of the procedure about just demolition permits, yes, I mean, the permit would need to be applied for, and we've had a lot of different reviewers for the city, building safety, others, but I will also need to sign off on that, and I won't be able to do so until the commission has approved a certificate that covers the demolition. So that does need to happen first. And as Sarah mentioned, we'll plan to bring the design at the replacement design or the design for the new construction at the same time.
Yeah, maybe a good example is like an interpretive sign. Like you might make a motion tonight that there should be an interpretive sign, and you might want to see its location on the certificate of appropriateness material, but Lauren might be who approves the content of it.
As you know, the last couple interpretive signs, some of which are coming back later in the agenda, that was the motion, was that the HPO would approve the final text of the plaque, that sort of thing.
Commissioner Westheimer, go ahead.
Yeah, I have two questions. One is, this is beyond a major impact. The desire to demolish a building is beyond a major impact. I mean, if we consider it a second story on a little house, a major impact, I would say that demolition is a little bit bigger. So when would a phase 2 be required? That's my first question.
You can, now, a phase 1 report identifies whether or not a phase 2 is needed, and a phase 2 is mitigation. So that would be something you're deciding tonight. Yes or no, we're requiring a phase 2 report. One of the Cornerstone, again, we'll go into their proposed mitigation measures, but because they proposed measured drawings to document the building, which is part of a phase 2 report, and that I think is because some of a phase 2 would generally be for a phase 1 that didn't have as much information as this one has. So a phase 2 generally goes into a lot more architectural description, but some of this they've already added to the phase 1. So that's why they proposed, I'm putting words in their mouth, but that's why they proposed the measured drawings in lieu of a full phase 2. But that is, either direction or neither is something the commission can discuss.
So I have a question, and just to clarify, so if we accept a phase 1 with the mitigations they have, that doesn't mean that we can't ask for more
No, it does.
mitigations to be proposed, or the
Correct.
mitigations are now off the table, that's it?
Everything that would be required to demolish this building, the commission should decide tonight. Some of them there may be things that will come back subject to later approval, like we want to see the site plan with this incorporated into the design, but the commission will not have the opportunity to add additional mitigation measures that were not previously discussed later on. Now is the time to do that.
But if one of the mitigation measures is the preparation of a phase 2 report, the commission would review the phase 2 report and accept it as final at a future meeting when it's resubmitted. Does that make sense? You still have to identify all the mitigation you want as part of the phase 1, but you will still see a phase 2 if that is included in your list of required mitigation.
So say, as community member Anthony Garcia said, that he'd like to see the facade incorporated into the new building. Then if we want to see that as a mitigation measure, how can we accept the phase 1 report if we have to see it in a phase 1 report? Or am I misunderstanding that?
That would, if the commission wants to discuss that as a mitigation measure, the developer and owner of the property is present online, and they and Cornerstone can probably both speak to whether that's feasible. But that would be something along those lines of anything that you wanted to see incorporated into the design would be something that you would structure it as. We want to, when we review the design, the certificate of appropriateness, we'd have final approval of that. However, I can tell you now that I'm sure they will speak to the fact of why they don't think that is feasible. And did not propose that, even though they had heard Commissioner Westheimer say it in the last meeting as something that she would like to see as mitigation. They don't feel that that's a feasible thing that they can do structurally in the size of the new building. So, but we'll probably best to put a pin in that until after we've had Cornerstone present all of the mitigation and kind of go from there. Are there any other questions, discussion items we want to cover before Cornerstone presents?
If the commission had accepted the phase 1 of 2 months ago, that building would be gone right now, right?
Correct.
So why is this being pushed through, and why didn't HPC? Well, I know there are plans out there. I saw them today, and we're being told
well, there's a concept plan which does not include elevations or renderings.
Right, but other people have seen pictures. This commission has seen nothing. So why is this being pushed through this commission? Why is this being pushed by the city of Flagstaff?
Well, I would say, so first of all, this report is just we're primarily talking about the eligibility significance of the building. You will see the design. And as we talked about in our training that we did with SHPO back in February, based on, and Sarah can weigh in on this, based on past experience, but there have been cases where designs were looked at too early before, and probably whatever you're looking at now, I can tell you that the rest of the city staff who are reviewing the concept plan are making enough comments that it is substantially going to change before the site plan. And then after a first round of site plan comments has been incorporated is generally when it would come to the commission, because just to meet fire code, landscaping requirements, everything else, the city is going to require enough changes that you don't want to look at something now to then just have to re-review the whole thing in 3 months when it's completely changed.
So I have a question about that. So it says in here, at this time, the site plan for the hotel has not been submitted for
That's
development
correct.
review. How many plans are there before? You said the concept plan is out there. I mean, how many steps are there that are in review
We have-
before we see the site plan?
Just the concept plan. It is not final or complete. We received a draft one that staff commented on, but it has not been resubmitted and has not been deemed complete. So we do not have a complete concept plan to show you. And we have not received a site plan yet, and that won't happen until the city has approved the concept plan.
I'm wondering if
let me see if I can answer that question too. So concept plan is a very simple, compared to a site plan. It's a much simpler submission for the city. Doesn't require any architectural renderings. It costs $300 to submit a concept plan. It's a very inexpensive review. We review it very quickly. We just say, you don't have the right information here. You're missing an easement. You haven't worked out this property issue with your neighbor, things like that. Like we give them very, very big picture feedback. And then when enough of that's resolved, it's deemed complete, and then they are allowed to submit site plan. So the reason they have not submitted a site plan is because we have the planning staff and all the members of the interdivision staff that reviews every 3 weeks all these applications has not yet deemed their concept plan complete. So they cannot submit a site plan. Even if one exists, staff cannot review it. That is not our procedure per the zoning code. So first of all, let's just clear that up. Even if some drawing exists somewhere or some drawing exists from some previous thing, that is not what we're reviewing. That is, staff is not allowed to review that until they have completed the concept plan step. They are also, we do not allow anymore because it's been tricky to review architectural renderings when they're not final. And we, a few years ago, when HPC moved from economic vitality to community development, that's something I was personally involved in changing. And the reason for that is we had architects who hadn't even submitted a site plan yet, who were trying to get in front of the commission and show you concept plans. And then by the time we got through, as Lauren said, fire and building safety and engineering and water systems, the design changed so much that they were having to come back a second time and have their appropriateness certificates reapproved. And so that was creating kind of a double jeopardy situation. We now say you must receive, the way the checklist works that staff put together for a site plan and for the certificate of appropriateness is you must receive your first round of site plan comments. Site plan is hard to do for a complicated building, especially in our downtown, in one go. It tends to have at least 2 or 3 reviews before we get it right. So what the process will be is they will submit a first site plan. That will be the first time the HPO reviews it. Then we will accept a certificate of appropriateness application and it will come before you. But we will not accept that application until they put in their first site plan review. And that is because that has gone way off the rails multiple times in the last 4 years. And so that is a procedure that staff has added to make sure that what shows up at the commission is worth your time to review. And we are still several months away probably from seeing that here in front of you. They are still working on issues. You know, a lot of that is happening in the background. But what you are reviewing tonight is the major impacts that the property owner has proposed, which, as Lauren has stated, is demolition. That's their proposed major impact. And then, is the mitigation being offered adequate? And you can keep that. That's the conversation for tonight. But I do want to make sure you understand that the certificate process is something, And maybe in this case, it would be worthwhile for us to have a review of the certificate process as a work session between now and when that comes back. As I stated earlier, what you are going to want to put in your motion is your checklist. What is the checklist? You're not going to say like, how will the mitigation happen? Because that will be something in the certificate of appropriateness if it's design related. But you can say what your expectation is, and then that conversation can continue as the certificate is applied for and reviewed.
And I'll just add one other clarification note and why this process is additionally confusing for this building. So the cultural resource study provision or section of our Heritage Preservation Code applies everywhere in Flagstaff. And so there are many cases in which that is the only thing you're going to see for the project. So the 418 East Birch study that you mentioned, or for example, the Mayhicks Curtis House combined phase 1, phase 2 study that Cornerstone did, that was one-stop shop that covered everything. This is a little different because it's also in an overlay and has and additionally different because it's in an overlay and hasn't actually been evaluated before, which most of the buildings between all the overlays have previously been evaluated. We already have an eligibility determination. So it's just extra complicated, and that's where there's a weird intersection between the certificate process and the cultural resource study process, which are parallel processes in the code, and that's essentially why the mitigation part exists in the phase 1 requirements, is because this is covering all bases everywhere in the city. This is just a little strange that here you also need to talk about a certificate of appropriateness at a later time.
So I have a question. So it doesn't trigger anything really different for the cultural resource study because it's in the downtown historic overlay?
No. If the difference would be, not for this project, but for if this building, they were just proposing an addition or a small remodel, and we would just be yes or no, it meets the guidelines for the district, then they maybe wouldn't need to have done the study. We would just be saying yes or no, this is appropriate per the design guidelines that exist. I mean, that's where it is different versus the same building outside the district doesn't have design guidelines, and they have to pay a consultant to come in and do the study for that building because that's the only way that they can assess the effect of what they're doing. So that's the difference between being in the overlay and being without. So.
And one more question about being in the overlay or adjacent to the railroad amendment addition historic district. Is that because the inventories are so old? They list in the bibliography 1979 for the railroad. A lot of the buildings weren't 50 years old then. That was
This one
a long time ago.
Yeah. And most of our National Register nominations are from the mid 80s, which the cutoff date then was the mid 30s. So yes, that is why many buildings are not. And not all of them. I mean, there's some, whether or not it was contiguous to make sense to put it in a district, right? And non-contributing properties like the Kinlani Apartments building, at the time it was listed, it was old enough, but it wasn't, it didn't have enough integrity. And then that building wasn't included in the district boundaries for that reason, and this is of course behind it. So some of those discussions too, like where you draw the boundary. But.
So this is probably a good time to segment for Cornerstones to present and then have more questions after. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Westmeyer. Go ahead.
What is the name of the certificate that would allow the demolition? Is it appropriateness?
It could be. So it's a certificate of no effect does not apply in this case because demolition is a major impact to a significant resource. So we're not, they can't apply for a certificate of no effect. They can apply for a certificate of appropriateness to include the demolition and the new design, and that would be the standard path that the commission would review. they can also apply for a certificate of economic hardship, or if the commission denied the certificate of appropriateness, they would have to apply. The next step would be to apply for a certificate of economic hardship. They could go there directly, or if that's an avenue they can pursue if the commission denied their certificate of appropriateness. And this is getting into the territory of what Sarah said, maybe we should have a work session where we can go all through this at a later time, because we're not going to decide that today.
Yes,
I think the process would be very helpful because we're only seeing a little picture and it's a little confusing to us. And we haven't, it was before I was here, we haven't gone over that process of how a project goes from concept to development.
so if we approve phase one, they get a certificate of appropriateness to demolish a building.
No,
No.
you just approve the phase one. They do not have approval for demolition. They will come back later with a certificate of appropriateness covering both the demolition and the new design, and you will review that. And if you approve that, then they would have approval from the commission for the demolition.
So if we talk with the developer and we express ourselves and the person listens and starts to see a different perspective, then how does that work? Let's say we talk about this and the developer who's here goes, oh, I did not understand that a citizen would come in and express his concerns for losing a building that means so much to so many. So let me revise it, and maybe we can do something like include the facade. So would that mean we would, if they wanted to revise their application, we would not approve the phase one, correct?
No, so I think for one, the findings of the report, is it significant? Is it eligible? Yes or no? You're still approving that. And if you're approving mitigation measures for a proposed impact, if they don't do that impact, then, that would reopen the conversation about whether or not those mitigation measures are required, but you wouldn't be revising the phase one.
I mean, revising the phase one, I meant the process would have to, what would happen to the phase one if the developer thought it through and decided that we can make some good points that they hadn't thought of before, that would be helpful for being a member of the community and respecting the community, blah, blah, blah. It would seem to me that we can't, the process, first of all, should never have gone this far without evaluating if it was eligible. But here we are. But if the developer wants to, like, say, did anyone talk to them about an eligible building can apply for tax credit? Did anyone talk to them about that?
I don't know specifically whether or not that has been considered. I mean, I don't think in this case, even if like they, for example, incorporated the facade, that it would remain eligible after, even if that was feasible, it would still be such a loss of integrity and a major impact that it would no longer be eligible. And I can't imagine that anyone would consider it as such to still be eligible for a program like that. Sorry, did you want to?
Yeah, I want to correct something that Commissioner Westheimer said. So you said that this shouldn't have gotten this far without making a determination of eligibility. This is the determination of eligibility. There is no previous time where that decision could have happened. So I want to make sure I correct that. There's no other process by which to do that.
Okay.
This is the process.
I will say
to
their
figure that.
concept plan was also timed with, they already had the report and submitted them concurrently based on the findings. So it's not that they have moved, months and months and months without considering this, that they did start at the same time.
Okay, but let's agree, because I stand corrected, but let's agree that the first phase one said it wasn't significant and eligible, and the commission said you need to rethink that. And now they're coming back and acknowledging there is significance and there is eligibility. So that sort of changes this whole situation as I see it.
I'd like to point out, though, that if we had inventories that were up to date, they could have identified that. So maybe that's something we can talk about later. As a commission, I'd like to suggest we do that as an agenda item for a meeting to talk about being proactive and maybe instead of reactive for historic preservation. I mean, it's been a benefit for developers as well to know before they look at a property to know whether or not it is eligible for the National Register. It's a benefit for the community to know what they have.
And Vice Chair Hayes, I'd like to say that we've repeatedly submitted budget requests to the City Council that really, whether we have the capacity to do proactive inventories and we have the staff to do them, they are very time intensive. There is a more than full work program for Lauren's position. And we've asked for those resources and we've yet to have them approved in the 5 years that I've been involved in the program. The budget of the Heritage Preservation program, and this is just for information purposes, is literally Lauren's salary.
Half of my salary.
Half of her salary. It does not
I'm only
include, it
part-time
does
at
not
this
include
position.
any money to print brochures or to
Mhm.
do any proactive historic preservation work. And that is ultimately up to the City Council on how that is done. And we've had times where the commission went forward and wrote letters of support for budget requests and things like that. And we can, this is the beginning of the fiscal year. So that's another item. Like I've written down like 2 or 3 things. So one, we need to, this will be a little confusing for tonight, but like I'd like us to stay focused on the actual decision before you. But we do understand that you'd like more information on how development review and the certificate process interact and what are the steps so that we can present that. I think we have presented that before, but we only do it every couple years, so it's good to do a refresher before you have another big case. And then we can certainly talk about if you'd like to see us do some proactive work about preparing some budget requests and getting some supportive statements from the commission of why that is, a way to move forward more effectively and more streamlined. And that's been the case we've tried to make before, is that actually we are taking a cost that the city could centralize and help move forward and putting it on the development community to do parcel by parcel.
And that is a good time to answer Mr. Garcia's comment about who pays for studies. And the industry standard nationwide is that generally the developer pays. Unless, and in this case, if that was to change, the city would have to obligate money for the city to pay for studies citywide, as you're suggesting, which is an option, but isn't something we could immediately implement without, like, for example, and as Sarah mentioned, so if we have development cases like this, that we would be footing, that we, the city, would be paying for the studies for the developer's project, which
And I'm aware of that. I worked in the private sector and it was the development companies who were building subdivision, whatever, who paid for the contract firm that did the work that paid for my salary. And that is actually quite standard. I meant to say that I had forgotten to mention that after Anthony Garcia was done. So I'm thinking maybe can we have in the miscellaneous items at the end of the meeting discuss a couple of things that I mentioned, agendizing a few things so that we can allow Cornerstones to go ahead and present, and therefore then we can talk about what our recommended actions are.
with that, I will invite Cornerstone up to the podium.
I want to thank them for coming into the building so we can actually hear you this time.
Yes, thank you for coming all the way down here to City Hall. While he's pulling up his presentation, just to clarify for a process, we also can allow the public to do a comment after the presentation, correct? Open it up for comments.
Yes, I'm sorry. I should have stopped you earlier and I didn't jump in fast enough, but usually the public comment all happens after. It's
Oh,
usually
okay.
staff presentation, consultant presentation, and then public comment. And I know that like this is your first time chairing, so I apologize that I like caught it like a minute into the piece because my head just didn't get there fast enough. But yes, that's so generally that is correct.
I've never seen one of these handed to Emily, so I was like, what is that?
I know sometimes we go through like 6 months and there's no public comment at this commission. So, well, I'll take the hit on that one. I'm sorry.
I did it. It's in the browser. It's not in Adobe.
Gotcha. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren, and thank you, commissioners, for your time this afternoon. Our presentation today will mostly focus on updates from our previous draft report, including historical research findings and our eligibility recommendations, as the other details of the project were covered in our previous presentation and are in our revised report as well. I want to begin by emphasizing that as a Flagstaff small business and as individuals that have dedicated our careers and our lives to cultural heritage, we care deeply about the history and built environment of Flagstaff. This care is put into every project we work on. Historic preservation is an iterative and collaborative process of research, fieldwork, law and city code, and implementation with many varied stakeholders and concerned parties, and we always welcome constructive feedback. So thank you. The goal, as always, is to achieve the best outcome for our shared history, properties, and community. Caitlin will begin today by presenting a summary of our follow-up research surrounding the social history of the former City Hall building, and then I will follow up from there.
All right, so for those of you who don't know me, I am Caitlin Stewart. I'm the owner and director of Cornerstone Environmental. We took a look at some of the constructive comments that the commission put forward. For those of you who read the last report, we had one of our biggest hurdles with this is because while we have recognized that this is a landmark and was important to people's everyday lives, our job is to find something significant to tie it to, right? Some of the hurdles that we had with that in our early research were a lack of records, right, which is problematic. It was in the 80s, I believe, that the City Hall flooded with all of the records, receipts, court cases, letters on hearings. We were limited on data. So we had to rely heavily on newspapers, what people had left maybe to the Klein Library, et cetera. Would be a lot easier to parse through had we had firsthand records. But unfortunately, we can't have all the things we want. One of the things that we did find that was a really helpful suggestion from the commission was to look at some of the social history in the sense that we looked at it from the outside, right? So not looking for the City Hall per se, but in what was happening in Flagstaff. We know that a lot happened between the 50s and the 80s. You know, we had Vietnam War, we had the feminist movement, we had civil rights, the anti-nuclear movements, a lot was happening. So we started with the Vietnam War, and unfortunately, well, not necessarily unfortunately, but between what we found with the newspapers and we talked to the former police chief, Pat Madden, he recalls that while protests for those things were happening, they were happening at NAU and they were happening at the county courthouse. They were not happening at that City Hall. Another important point of why it might not have been happening at that City Hall versus other places is that the transition from the previous City Hall to this one was never meant to house everything in a single building. There was the City Hall, and then there were 4 other buildings that housed other things like the Zoning Commission, Housing Authority, which also kind of limited us, right, as well. Like the South Side redevelopment project happened in 1958. However, that was done by the Housing Authority, and that was not done at the City Hall. And that's kind of what we found from
talking to Pat Madden, which Jack did the interview with. But we did manage to tie it to the civil rights movement, specifically the American Indian movement. So AIM was a foundation or a group of people founded in the late 1960s to advocate for Indigenous rights. Some of you are probably familiar with them. They did the protests at Alcatraz. They did some of the first environmental protests at Black Mesa, the Trail of Broken Treaties. But before that, they did some local protests, just like a lot of these movements do across the country. One of those protests happened here. Happened at the Flagstaff All Indian Powwow. So we don't have it anymore, but for those who aren't familiar, started in the late 20s. We held at City Park, which is now Thorpe Park. Basically, they would set up stadiums. They would invite Native American communities to come in, perform dances, things like that. They would camp out at City Park. It was meant to be an acknowledgement of Native American ceremonies, songs, and dance. But during this time period, not everybody agreed with that view. AIM specifically felt that it was an exploitation of the Native American community. And so in 1972, so pretty early on in the AIM movement, 7 members of AIM showed up at the powwow at City Park. They pulled a microphone from the announcer's hand and they shouted across to everybody, don't dance for money, something along those lines. They were arrested by Flagstaff Police Department, charged with rioting and inciting a riot. However, all the newspapers indicate that there was no riot. Their bond was then set at, in 1972, $20,000 apiece. At this time, and it was retired Police Chief Madden also confirmed that at this point, again, one of the limitations of this building is that when they built the jail, it ended up by the mid-70s only, or the early 70s, only being able to house individuals temporarily, and then they would go to the county courthouse to be processed. So they probably only stayed here for a day or two while they were being processed. However, they were arrested by the Flagstaff City Police, processed, and housed here. Following that arrest, specifically regarding, at least initially, the excessive bond of $20,000 for what had been the rioting and inciting a riot, which were the 2 felonies, were dropped pretty much immediately. So to hold that kind of bond for some misdemeanor crimes was considered excessive. AIM leaders from Colorado called in and said that they would do protests in Flagstaff indefinitely until they provided an appropriate bond. In the end, those protesters were given 30 days in county jail. But following that, they called for an investigation of their treatment during these arrests, but also treatments of all Native Americans who are being arrested at this time. Not only hearings here or at the City Hall, there would have been records, but again, they don't exist anymore. But also they traveled to Phoenix and talked to the U.S. or the Arizona branch of the Commission of Civil Rights. They did what happened here in Flagstaff, also led to other protests such as in Ajo. And until eventually AIM moved on to other states. However, that set something in motion. Specifically, their claims and all of these hearings that were held led to the U.S. Commission of Civil Rights doing an investigation into Flagstaff procedures, specifically the police and the City Hall. Now, mind you, these, to some extent, and even in the commission reports, it's recognized that these are systemic issues that are happening everywhere. And they're specifically happening in what they call border towns, so towns directly next to reservations. However, they also, at the beginning, this is relatively early on in the American Indian civil rights. So these are some of the first investigations that are happening into departments. That U.S. Commission report led to some monitoring done by the Arizona branch and eventually some monitoring at 2 different times by the ACLU. And what they found at that time was largely things that en masse arraignments with no interpreters. Because Flagstaff was still a pretty small town, this was the city's response. You know, the judges at the time weren't attorneys, didn't have legal, but a lot of towns didn't have that as well. But specifically because of this, things like they were doing en masse arraignments, no public counsel was provided, and then it coming back to this enforcement of illegal bonds, right? Which ended up happening with these AIM protesters, but had been happening forever, or had been happening for quite a long time. Just after the first 2 investigations, 3 Native American gentlemen sued the city of Flagstaff, the police department, and then several individuals, basically calling for a change in procedures. The case was dismissed. However, it was only dismissed assuming that, or with the expectation that in the next 6 months, these certain things would have to change as far procedurally. Specifically, no more, or you cannot ask for bonds if the offense does not require jail time. Because that's what was happening is they would require bonds, people would not be able to provide them, and they would end up spending time in jail, maybe weeks, because they couldn't pay the bond, even though the offense was not jailable. So what we found is that this initial arrest ties this city hall to a significant event, both regionally, right, as well as to some extent to the national movement as well. 2 of these individuals who were part of those arrested ended up becoming very prominent members. This was pretty early on in their career, but one of them, Leroy Keems, ended up being the poster child for the Black Mesa environmental movement. And I wish we had put a photo in this because you'd all recognize it. And Henry Begay went on for a short period of time to be leader of the movement as well. Again, a national movement. But it also is a significant event in the change of approach and the changes in identity of Flagstaff, right? As from a settlement community to one that had to acknowledge the other members of their community. And those things, as we all know, are constantly evolving. But you can point to this movement and these arrests to say that it led to significant change here over a period of a decade, 2 decades, and is still obviously still changing. But I could continue on. But what I want to get at is that we spent a lot of time trying to tie it to a specific event. And I think that this one, we probably could have tied the building to other things if more records had been available. This is an important piece of history that should be acknowledged as part of Flagstaff. Not just that this is a place that people went and paid their water bills and went to work every day and is a landmark they walk by, but also the impetus for this important movement. And then I will let Jack talk about the significance.
So based off of that follow-up research and our reevaluation, looking at Flagstaff Criterion B, NRHP Criterion A, we reevaluated it under the areas of significance of government and social history. The former City Hall was the seat of local government, although, as Caitlin said, not all city offices were based in it. But as such, it is broadly associated with the development of civic government in the mid-20th century. But the actions of these entities based out of there did help precipitate these larger events in town. And this was a pivotal event in Flagstaff history. Based off of that, because of this association with significant local historical events related to government and social history, we do recommend the property significant under City of Flagstaff Criterion B and NRHP Criterion A. For association with significant persons, Flagstaff Criterion C, NRHP Criterion B. Yes, members of city government were instrumental in the functioning of the city, and these noted individuals were briefly incarcerated in the building. We felt these persons were either not significant enough or not associated with the property in substantial enough ways for it to qualify under these criteria. So taking Mayor Wheeler, for instance, very influential mayor, very important in Flagstaff history. But per Flagstaff Criterion C, does it represent the work of or for an important individual? And we're not quite sure it falls under that category. You know, Mayor Wheeler did a lot of work for Parks and Recreation. And so we have city park named after him, and that seems like an appropriate measure. But we are obviously open to recommendations and suggestions here as well. For Flagstaff Criterion D and NRHP Criterion C for architecture, we evaluated it again and found that the building still retains and conveys its fundamental utilitarian international style design language, expressed in a more organic Flagstaff vernacular form, befitting a public-facing civic building of its time and place. While other buildings in Flagstaff do display similar architectural elements, whether it's the international style or the Malpai, a few others display them in this particular combination and at the scale and stature of the former City Hall building. So based off of those factors, we do recommend the building locally significant under the area of architecture for City of Flagstaff Criterion D. The specificity of these factors, along with changes to the interior that I'll talk about in a minute, make it likely not significant under NRHP Criterion C, but we are also open to feedback on that. For integrity, location, no changes there. It is in the location where it was constructed. It is strong. And here we split out exterior and interior because obviously interior is not going to play into the City of Flagstaff recommendations. We do have to take it into account for the NRHP recommendations. So that's why we're splitting it out here separately. Design is going to be important for NRHP criterion A and C. Changes to the exterior, some of the notable ones would be the filling in of the fire department bay doors and the removal of the fire horn tower. And the interior was extensively remodeled after the period of significance. So for exterior only, for purposes of City of Flagstaff, somewhat diminished here due to those changes over time with the fire horn tower and the fire department bays, but still certainly present, if only a little diminished. Taking interior into that account for purposes of NRHP, it's a little more weak because of those changes. For setting, no real changes here either. The surrounding area has changed somewhat over the decades, but it remains an active downtown neighborhood, so diminished. Materials, workmanship, important for A and C. The building retains most, though not all, important elements of materials and workmanship on the exterior. Again, some changes over time with windows, etc. So diminished. Taking interior into account for purposes of the National Register, a little more weak. Feeling, relating to the overall recognizability of the property. Looking at the external, despite some changes over time that we mentioned earlier, the building still has the feeling of a public civic structure, such as a city hall, if one were to walk by it on the street. So taking only the exterior into account, we're going with strong for feeling. Taking that interior into account, would individuals who worked in that building or who were incarcerated there, would they recognize the interior? Probably not. So we have to go with weak for taking that full interior and exterior integrity into account for feeling. Association, this kind of sums up all of the previous ones. How strongly does its integrity associate it with these important historical events and aspects? And we went here considering only the exterior integrity. The building has present but diminished association with the themes of government and social history. Considering the interior as well, this integrity is slightly more diminished, but not quite weak either. In summary, we recommend the building significant under City of Flagstaff criterion B and NRHP criterion A for its associations with the areas of social history and government, and particularly for its association with the Native American civil rights movement in Flagstaff with sufficient integrity to qualify for eligibility. We also recommend the building significant under City of Flagstaff criterion D for its architectural qualities, with sufficient integrity to qualify for eligibility, although this likely does not extend to NRHP criterion C eligibility. For recommended mitigation, given the building's recommended eligibility under for its historical associations under City of Flagstaff criterion B and NRHP criterion A, for those associations, we recommend incorporation of the building's history and the history of Native American rights in Flagstaff, incorporating that into the new construction in the form of a plaque, historic photographs placed in the lobby, and incorporation of Malpai stone from the original building as a cornerstone in remembrance in the new building. Given the building's recommended eligibility under City of Flagstaff criterion D for architecture, further documentation may be appropriate. It may be that historic photos showing the building in its location there are sufficient, or it may be that some additional documentation in the form of elevation, architectural elevation drawings may be appropriate as well. Again, as we've mentioned earlier, that's a decision that we felt would be better deferred to the commission here. So that's all we have.
Thank you. And I really do appreciate that history of the ACLU involvement in the American Indian movement. I didn't know that. I mean, Jesse had mentioned something I had no idea. Do you have a picture of that? What was that? The fire horn tower? Is there anything? Oh, that's what's in the back. Okay.
This is, yeah, this is a concept drawing that was published in the paper before it was constructed. And so this was, and then earlier we had, yeah, here's a photograph of the building from its period of significance. So slightly different from the original design. And then this is how it ended up being built.
I had assumed that was another building in the back. I was thinking fire horn tower. I guess I was thinking along the lines like fire tower. So thank you very much. And do we have any questions from the commission?
I had a question. First off, I'd also like to just echo my thanks for considering our recommendations and the really thorough research that you put in. I especially was impressed that you interviewed the former police chief and was able to get that firsthand information. I thought that was a really nice addition. And I know there was a little comment in there about perhaps the Malpais. I know you didn't have the original drawings, that those had been lost, but that perhaps the Malpais had not been in the original architect's plan. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about that. Did you think that they were, just based on what you were able to find, or were you really able to speculate?
It would literally be speculation. So yeah, the best we had, again, our assumption is that the original plans were likely lost in the events. But yeah, so all we really have to go off of is the conceptual drawing that was published in the paper. That does not show it, but it also might have been an artistic choice that the Malpai would have been difficult to draw. So yeah.
Yeah, just what I was going to say is because we went through hundreds of newspaper articles, I'm guessing it was not part of the original design. And the reason for that is because there was a discussion among the city out in the newspapers about whether or not it'd be too expensive. So, and it was before this drawing was put in, but only by a month or so. So my guess was that that was something that somebody had the idea to incorporate, but may not have been part of the architect's plan initially.
I have a question. If you found any tie to the building basically being a combined sort of municipal building for Flagstaff at a time when Flagstaff had seen a lot of growth. A lot of our subdivisions, historic subdivisions come from that time. The Navajo Depot was a big part of the economy in the Northern Arizona and Flagstaff in World War II. And it seems like this building comes around, like this building comes because of all of a sudden Flagstaff has really boomed and grown.
So this building actually, and I can understand where that comes from, but this building, to some extent, it is tied to it peripherally. The difference because of Navajo Depot, et cetera, the growth happened here during the war. A lot of it did. We doubled in size by the end of the war because of Route 66 being used as a military transport. So this came about after that. And while the only real tie to it, everything I can find is that they tore down the original one from the 1950s because they got incredibly poor jail ratings. They were having issues with the building, not necessarily because they were looking for something bigger, though I couldn't really find too much on how big the other one was, or the previous one was. That's now a parking lot. But it doesn't seem that this was a direct impetus, or, like it didn't come directly from the growth. It came for some practical concerns because they had tried to, even before the war, they had tried to get a new city hall, but they didn't have any money because of the poor state of the previous city hall. So I'm sure that the housing authority, like we talked about the South Side redevelopment, I'm sure that there were probably there were definitely people talking about it in the city hall. There might have been some movements, but a lot of that would have been dealt with the housing authority, which again was not in this building. So we couldn't make a strong link to it. But I'm sure it impacted it. It's just we couldn't make a strong link to it.
I'm curious if there are not any of the insurance maps or anything that shows the size of, the square footage of the previous city hall. Just curious how much the new one, how much larger it was.
It does. And again, they're not the most accurate of drawings. And it seems slightly bigger, but the size of it wasn't, and this had to be bigger because they were combining the fire department, right?
Mhm.
There was, previously the fire department wasn't there, it was on the east side, and it stayed on the east side as well, but this became the main fire department. So it was a little bit bigger because of the inclusion of the fire department, but overall it housed about the same amount of people from what we can tell from employee records.
Interesting. Do we have any other questions for commissioners before asking the people online? So to make sure I'm following the procedures correctly, open up to the people online for questioning for cornerstones and then the public.
Can you clarify what you mean by the people online? You mean Abby? Commissioner Buckham? Is that what you're asking? Sorry.
No, I mean, I can't see who read the names up there, but I see that we have quite a few people who have joined us virtually.
Yes, so people who are here representing the applicant or staff, or I think we have at least one representative of SHPO who we may have questions for, can be called on by the chair. I think that Jim O'Connell is the person who has his hand up right now, and he's the representative of the property owner. But then members of the public that want to comment need to wait for the discussion to be temporarily paused for public comment to be called. So there's, we will help you sort that
Thank you.
by notifying you if it's someone who we know is part of the team, and same with Cornerstone. If you recognize a name up there that we don't, then let us know. But yeah, right now the Jim O'Connell, who is the representative of the property owner, is waiting to be called on by you, Vice Chair.
So Mr. O'Connell, if you'd like to speak.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there tonight. I had surgery Monday and haven't left the house since then. But I just wanted the commission to know that we are following the steps of the city. And once we get our plans completed where we can come back to the commission in a couple of months, I think you're going to be highly surprised at the type of work we've put into this project and what it's going to look like. My design team, who is doing the interior design and all the design of the hotel, they've been up there. They've talked to NAU, they've talked to the city, they've been all over the place. And we're incorporating a lot of those things into the building. And preliminary, I can't say that every room's going to be exactly this way, but one room's having the lumberjack interior design. One area is having the Native American indigenous people. We have Route 66. Our bar is going to have a look up theme due to the observatory. So we've done a lot of research about Flagstaff, about what's made Flagstaff, between the railroad, between the Forest Service, everything. And that's all going to be combined in the interior design of the building. It's going to be something that when someone walks into the building, they're going to ask questions, or they're going to see that if they know Flagstaff, that this was what Flagstaff is all about. And our plans are, is once we have the concept plan completed, approved, once I have our design narrative on the interior and our architectural plans done on the outside, I plan on having somebody from our design team come up and do a presentation. So you know exactly what the building looks like before you ever give us a certificate of authenticity for demolition. I've looked at the building as far as what's going to be there is a 5-story hotel with a rooftop bar. The current structure will not support anything like that. That's why we've chose to take some of the outside stone and put it in a cornerstone with the plaque, those type of things, so that if someone comes up to the building, oh, this is what the stone that was on the building. In the lobby, we've got quite an array of pictures of what was there, what the building looked like, the fire department. I want to make sure that everyone that comes to the hotel leaves with, this is what was here before and this is what Flagstaff is all about. So I don't have a lot of questions for you. I mean, I can't answer all your questions. I'm just giving you an overview of what we're planning on doing, so you have a little bit better idea. Thank you.
Thank you for taking into consideration the character of Flagstaff. You mentioned the interior. Do you have anything that plans for the exterior that sort of matches a Flagstaff vernacular or the feel of Flagstaff? Will there be Malapai stone, for instance?
Currently, and I don't want to get myself too far ahead, but currently the building is a brick building, which then matches a lot of the buildings that are sandstone or brick in downtown Flagstaff. That's about the best I can say right now, because we're working through the architectural plans. And I have understand that there's a lot of masters. Hilton has to approve this. You guys have to approve it. The city has to approve it. So I have a lot of masters to approve everything, and not everybody's going to get everything they want except for the city, because we can't build without the city's approval. So, but when we get to that point, you'll have a full presentation of exactly what the building's going to look like, interior, exterior.
Thank you, Jim, for giving that presentation and being willing to answer our questions. Hope your recovery is going well.
Thank you.
As an NAU graduate, where I got my master's, is very well, many people here have gone to NAU, but we're quite aware that NAU and Flagstaff are not the same. NAU is its own entity, and Flagstaff has a deep, rich, diverse, complex history. And my understanding is that the hotel is going to be called the Graduate, and Is
The
there,
Graduate, you're correct. The Graduate is the brand name for the Hilton Hotel. So what AJ Capital started the Graduate Hotel, they basically all have to be within a certain distance of a university. And then you have things from the university, you tie in with the university, but it's not 100% tied in. We're tying in some things from the university. We're tying in things like, the Olympic Training Center. We're tying in things from the Pioneering Women in Flagstaff, the Northern Museum, the Museum of Northern Arizona. These are all things that we've looked at. The Riordan Mansion. We've studied all these things, and I know one thing we're looking at is some of the wallpaper that's in the Riordan Mansion that will possibly be, or that pattern will be in some of the rooms for the hotel. So there's a combination of all kinds of things that's going to make this thing Flagstaff and NAU. It's not all about NAU. It's the Graduate's just Hilton's name. But we design it. They have to prove the design, but our designers design it.
I have another question. Did the city share with you the downtown overlay design book?
Yes, our architect has that.
Good, thank you.
Just to give you just a little overview of myself, I'm third generation, grew up in Helena, Montana, small town. I know about the history of small towns. I've moved around the United States. I built 16 hotels. If you'd like to see our last hotel, look up the Eddy Hotel in Tucson, Arizona. It's a Hilton Tapestry. It's called the Eddy because it's all based after my grandfather and our family tree roots. So if you want to see this, what quality of hotel we build and what type of things we put in the hotels, look at the Eddy Hotel in Tucson, Arizona, and I think you'll be impressed. It's a very beautiful hotel.
So along those lines, may I ask, so if I understand the branding, Hilton Tapestry is the brand, but you call it the Eddy? Is that correct?
Yes, because you're able to, it's the Tapestry brand, but Tapestry has to have a story. So it could be like an old flour mill that you purchased and turned into a flour. You turned into a hotel and you called it the gin mill or whatever. You have to develop a story for your hotel. And our story for the Tapestry was the Eddy Hotel based on our family. With the Graduate, you can't do a story like the Eddy, but you can design your design. So Hilton looks at all of our design. Believe me, we're the first Graduate since they bought this brand. They're nitpicking everything to death. So it's going to be of high quality, of great character, and a lot of Flagstaff in there. When we do our presentation, you'll see we've done a lot of work to get it to that point. I'm just following the process. That's why I'm not showing anything more. I'm following the process. So we get past this one. Then I'm working on getting my concept plan completed back to the city. I'm working on getting everything for the site plan, and I'm working on getting everything to have a meeting in a couple months with you on the certificate of authenticity regarding the demo process.
Do you have any more questions?
I have a comment, but I don't know that it's going to be heard. So
Do we have any other questions from the commissioners? Any commissioners online?
I don't have any questions, but I do want to say that I appreciate all the thought and research that they've put into this project. I know that it takes a lot of time and effort and money to do these things, and it does seem like you're being very thoughtful with wanting to represent Flagstaff, but it does make me uncomfortable to demolish a perfectly functional building. but that isn't necessarily, I guess, what we're discussing at the moment.
I did have a question for Jim on whether or not they had looked at it, trying to incorporate the facade or some way into the building, maybe having the hotel set back a little bit, or putting the building or the hotel, say, over on LaRue to avoid demolition of the building on Beaver and Birch.
We've looked at all different angles where to have it. Over on LaRue is a parking garage because there is nowhere to park, so we're building a parking garage on that site. The this site is not big enough for a parking garage on this side. I feel also that having the hotel on this side, you're gonna get people going around the corner over there, which you don't really have now. The people are they're gonna come out of the hotel and they're gonna go down Birch or Beaver and go down around the corners, and that's gonna get more traffic flow down around that area that there wasn't there before. But the building is, the basement floods when there's a flood. They put plywood down in there to build it all up, so anything they stored before was out of the flood. So I can't have a basement down there in the flooding. That area is a flood. It's got to be, the first floor and all of our windows will have to be higher, a little bit above the flood zone. So there's a lot of new things, new codes that are today that just won't work for this building.
And on that note, Jim, do you also want to speak to the asbestos issue that you're dealing with, just so the commission's aware of that consideration as well?
Well, there was some asbestos in the building that's being removed. On the other two buildings, there was asbestos that was removed. So that's all been hired by an asbestos company and taken out. Some of these, Mike Mangione, who owned the building, he wants to take the windows out of the building and take the doors and reuse them somewhere else. So I've told him he can take anything out of the inside of the building to reuse. That helps less stuff going to the dump, and that puts some things in his and his son's hands to use in other buildings.
I have a process question for Lauren and Sarah. And so in our agenda, it says the demolition and new hotel proposal will be subject to a certificate of appropriateness and scheduled for public hearing with the Heritage Preservation Commission during the development review process. What do you mean by public hearing? Just that our meetings are agendized and published for the public, and that someone can come and speak on the proposed design?
Yes, yes. And just like this is under the public hearing section of this agenda, that a certificate of appropriateness is also a public hearing item, just like a phase one.
So the public would have an opportunity to have an ability to speak on the design elements. And at that time, we still will not be at pulling a demo permit, correct?
That would be something that would be what you would be considering, essentially. The certificate, you would be looking at the demolition and the design of the graduate.
So if we have no more questions from the commission, is this a good time to open it up for public comment?
I have more comments in general. I just didn't have any more questions for Cornerstone, if we're done with Cornerstone.
Well, go ahead, Commissioner Horn. I should have said comments and questions. Sorry, that's what I meant.
So I pulled up the city code for mitigations. And for identified major impacts, there are 5 identified mitigation measures. The first is avoidance of significant cultural resource or impacts by not taking certain actions. The second is preservation of cultural resources in place. The third is minimizing major impacts by limiting the degree. The fourth is allowing other parties to acquire the cultural resources, and the fourth is data recovery. Nowhere does it say that a plaque is a mitigation or that taking photos is a mitigation, posting photos. And I guess I'm just getting tired of seeing us demolish buildings and putting up plaques and saying that's a mitigation. So I would like to see more substantive mitigations that are applied to all of our buildings that are being demolished. Because I just see us demolishing buildings and putting up plaques. And we're going to be left with parking lots and new buildings and plaques and photos of what used to be there.
I am with you 100%.
I also agree with you, Amy. I feel like lately it seems like it does get frustrating. I feel like we're putting up plaques and in front of parking lots. And it seems like there could be, is there more we can do for mitigation? Is what I wonder every time we have a meeting and we're at this point where we're talking about plaques and pictures. What more can we do?
I agree with what Amy said, and I think that's something that we can ask. We can ask for, I mean, we're making decision on mitigations today. We can ask for a revision with more creative proposed mitigations, correct? And that we see this at the next meeting if they're able to prepare it in time to agendize it by the deadline. Because doing just some blocks in the corner of the room and some pictures and a plaque does not seem to be enough for demolishing part of Flagstaff's history. And this seems to be happening like every other meeting we have, we're seeing a building go down.
And yes, under the code, your review, so you can approve or conditionally approve the study and the proposed mitigations, or you can require additional research, documentation, or mitigations prior to acceptance. So you could require any of those three to come back for additional review before acceptance.
I
One
would
of-
hope that, that Mr. O'Connell, with his personal history in Helena, would understand the connections people feel to place. Flagstaff has that very strongly. We have many families that have been here for over 100 years, like Mr. Garcia's family. And we all love our place, and many of the people living here now feel a great connection to that building, whether we have our own personal stories there of someone told me the other day when she was her story from being a teenager. I've had so many people come up to me and comment that they don't want to lose the building, which is why we're saying, can you please incorporate that facade, whether you build your hotel sort of attached to it on the backside, something to acknowledge the love people have for Flagstaff and our history. It's not a perfect history. No one's claiming that Flagstaff's always been a perfect place, but we still love our place and we don't like to lose it. Excuse me for my emotional, but I'm someone who came here by choice and I love it. And I don't want to see it continue to disappear. And yes, you own the property and yes, you can demolish, but I would hope that you would understand that Flagstaff's, to the people who live here, it's a very special place. And that building, we all have a connection to it. So, and then I just want to read the purpose of this commission, the Heritage Preservation Commission. This is from 10/30/30/010 purpose. The purpose of this division is to protect and enhance the cultural, historical, and archaeological heritage of the city of Flagstaff by recognizing, preserving, enhancing, and perpetuating the use of those objects, structures, sites, and landscape features that represent distinctive elements of the city's cultural, political, architectural, and archaeological history. The council finds and intends that preservation of the city's heritage is in the interest of the health, economic prosperity, education, cultural enrichment, and general welfare of the public. So the reason I asked about the Hilton brand and then you were able to add another name is that it would seem to me that people of Flagstaff would be very appreciative, and maybe I'm overstepping my bounds speaking for other people, but I think people would be appreciative if you were to use the facade and call that the City Hall Hotel, as opposed to something that's so tightly tied to NAU to call it the Graduate, because Flagstaff is not NAU, and that's a serious point for people living here as we watch NAU take over our community. Thanks.
And I think for me, one of the things, I mean, one of the mitigations is data recovery. So I would like to see a complete phase 2 cultural resource report that includes, some of the things that are listed in the city code. archival grade photography, as-built drawings, elevation drawings, we can consider full HABs hair documentation, if we're gonna go that route.
So
That documents the
just as
building.
a quick comment, I think that is to some extent what we're suggesting, like Lauren mentioned, part of that phase two, as you're talking about data recovery. When we're talking about the significant event, I understand that the city hall is a landmark. We want to preserve the facade, but the data recovery part of it, of the phase two, comes with this archival research, which we've probably put in 300 hours on this. There's not much more to find for us, but I agree that, and so I guess I'm just trying to make the distinction between, yes, we agree that there should be a documentation of the building, elevations, that's what we were suggesting, but not necessarily suggesting a phase two, because we would probably just submit this report as part of that one part of the phase two.
Right, that's what I'm suggesting, is the documentation of the building as the phase two, not any more, not any more research, because yeah, I agree that you've done very exhaustive research on the history of the building, yeah.
I'd like to point out that the City of Flagstaff's goals are sustainability and climate change, and there is nothing more sustainable than readaptive and reusing a historic building and reusing those materials instead of putting them in a landfill. And that should be something that is considered for every development.
Commissioner Buckham has her hand up online.
Sorry, Abby, go ahead.
No problem. I guess I just
See from the side.
I would like to echo back to my earlier question about demolishing. I know that ultimately we vote or have the certificate of approval, but it doesn't necessarily feel like we get to prevent demolitions. We are just kind of told that it's time to mitigate. Do we actually have the agency to say that we don't want a building demolished?
We can again go through the code and do the training and go through all of the various options. But the most exhaustive option under our code would be for the applicant to apply for a certificate of economic hardship, in which they would essentially show that it's not economically feasible for them to not move forward with this project. And there are additional requirements, like, that they couldn't find someone to buy it for the price that they could develop it for, and that sort of thing. And if the commission was to deny the certificate of economic hardship, the next step would be a 1-year delay of demolition to try and find someone essentially who would buy it to preserve it. And in the event that that is not possible, yes, they could move forward with demolition there. And so eventually, yes, there is a longer process. And Sarah, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, and I just want to add that the decision to put a 1-year delay of demolition in place is not the Heritage Preservation Commission's decision. It is a recommendation the Heritage Preservation Commission can make to council. We have never done, and I will say since 2006, there has never been a delay of demolition. So if things, that's, I think, why earlier in the conversation, Laura and I were trying to make sure you knew that we want to stay really focused on the cultural resource study tonight. We know there's awareness of the continuing process, but we'd like to come back and do a more thorough work session on that, where we can talk through those things. And you can also have legal advice, of course, as part of an e-session and a presentation like that if we have those more technical questions that would require legal advice. Just like we announced at the beginning, you can call to go into an e-session and those kinds of things. So that may be the kind of thing that it'd be good to have it separate from consideration of this case, so that when you are considering this case, we're able to do that without kind of going into that detail on the process at the same time.
So I think part of the reasons we're asking the questions is we're not very aware. I don't think we've had this training on the code and things. So we're uncertain, and it's good for us to know before we meet as a commission again, because we don't meet and discuss this outside of here. So we need to ourselves understand as we're reading through this, I'm asking myself, well, as the commission, what can we suggest? And what can we in the future do to educate ourselves and so that we can be more proactive? Here, historic buildings in Flagstaff are a big part of the economy too. When people come to Flagstaff, heritage dollars stays in Flagstaff. And a lot of the businesses that are downtown in Flagstaff are not chains. They're owned by people. They're art galleries, they're bookstores that are not chains. And that is part of the character and charm that why people want to come to Flagstaff in the first place. So it's very important that the role that we have in preserving Flagstaff buildings also is preserving the character of Flagstaff itself. And on that, I also have a question about the code because I read it and I don't really understand what it means. But when I look at general provisions, conflicting provisions, it says when the provisions of this division conflict with any other laws, codes, or regulations, then the provisions of this division shall govern, not may, shall, except for matters of life and safety where the more restrictive of such laws, codes, or regulations shall apply. This is not life safety. So how come we're not taking historic preservation more seriously in the case of a building that we've now found is eligible?
I think you'd have to clarify for me what you mean by taking it more seriously. We are following the process in the code. We are presenting you the material that is required, both staff and the consultant, and we're having the discussion. That is the manner by which we take this seriously. And that's why you're asking questions about how can we make a motion or what else can be required? Or can there be a phase 2? By definition, that's everyone taking it very seriously. There are always, of course, limitations on authority. I mean, there is, the consideration today. I will go back to this statement because this will be the third time I've said it, and I'll say it again if I have to, is the cultural resource study. All of these future iterations, I have heard you. I understand we need to go into them in more detail. The key thing that has been done and the difference between the last meeting is that the last meeting, based on the preliminary research, there had been a recommendation that it not be found significant. The commission requested further research. That further research led to the recommendation that it is significant. We haven't really even dug into integrity yet tonight, and we're already getting, an hour plus into discussion, so I want to make sure we're bringing that to everyone's attention. So does the commission agree with the finding of significance? Does the commission agree with the findings around integrity? Are the mitigations being proposed appropriate for the impacts that are identified? We don't really get to say the way these work is you identify kind of the maximum impacts. We've had a lot of buildings that have completed phase 2 cultural resource studies for future demolition and then have never been demolished. It doesn't mean that because you approve the cultural resource study with the major impacts that it's always going to happen. And the building cannot be demolished until you've approved a certificate of appropriateness that both includes the demolition and the design of the new building. So we know the old building's not going to be demolished until we know what the new building looks like. So that is all taking it very seriously. That is all following a process. Like everything in land use planning, we have to follow constitutional due process for both the applicant and in how we're handling the case. So that's how we're treating everybody fairly and taking everything seriously. Today, this commission needs to discuss, do you concur with the finding of significance? Do you concur with the finding of integrity in various ways, which we need to go over still? And then whether or not you want to see more mitigation, different mitigation, happy with the mitigation. And then of course, if, as Commissioner Horn said, is there the need for a phase 2? Those are really your 4 things we need to get discussed and nailed down as part of your motion and part of your discussion tonight. Many of these other things I know up to this point have been about making sure we're having understanding around the whole process, but The decision tonight is those 4 things. Yes, they have consequences for the later process, but that's not part of your acceptance of the cultural resource study, which is the decision you're making tonight under the code.
Commissioner Westheimer, did you have a comment?
I would like to point out some things that are incorrect in the cultural resource study, and I've written things. I know there are always mistakes. You can go over it 1,000 times and there will always be mistakes. However, some are more important than others. To spell the name Babbitt correctly is important. To spell Prochnow correctly, that's important too. So please go back and correct those. Let's see, there's at least one photograph that was taken at the wrong time of day that you can easily fix. You took the north facade photograph too late in the day. So if you take it earlier in the day, you'll have better light on the building and you won't. Yeah, you can fix that with computers, but you'll get a better photograph if you take it the right time of day. I would appreciate having Pat Madden put in as a source in your sources. You did acknowledge him and I appreciate that, but he's not listed that I could find. And he took his personal time and experiences to share with you.
And he was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Great. And so, but please do spell people's names correctly. Those are my big things in the cultural resource study. Oh, and because the building is eligible, it also meets City of Flagstaff criteria A.
Not that we have an issue with that, because it honestly doesn't change the outcome. We do try to be correct. So that we will get back to you on. Yes, we are a small company and we do not have a tech editor. So I apologize I am the tech editor, but I'm also the owner and the director. So I do occasionally miss things, and that is an unfortunate oversight.
That's why I mention it, because I saw it and
Yeah.
right, trying to help.
I have a name that people misspell all the time too. So we all just think we talk about it.
So I apologize for that. My understanding of the City of Flagstaff criterion A is that if there was a determination previously made about the NRHP, we don't make determinations. We make recommendations that things can be determined eligible for SHPO and for the register. So that could be why that is not in the report.
Yeah, Sam, that's a great point. As consultants, our job is largely just to make recommendations based on our findings. We don't actually have the authority to determine anything one way or the other. But
So I'd like to comment that that part does need to be updated, right? Because I'm the concerned citizen who submitted the report to the SHPO and asked for their weigh-in. And they came back with that it would be National Register eligible under A and likely under C, but it'd need more information about the building, particularly the exterior. So I didn't see a lot more added about the integrity of the building on the exterior. There was still an awful lot about the interior. And when I look at integrity and everything, it's more of like, would I be able to walk up to the building and recognize it if I had seen it in 1951? And I would if I had lived then and been in Flagstaff.
yeah, and that's obviously part of a consideration, right? As we discussed, we added in details about the architecture that are available. And the exterior, we had limited photos, limited drawings, but so only some of the information could we actually address. But we addressed what we could substantiate, because again, that's our primary role. And yeah, I would agree that and if we didn't put it in, I believe we did discuss that it still does look like it could be a city hall, with the exception of the bay windows and the fire horn, which everybody was really excited to get rid of. Apparently it was very unpopular. But no, I mean, other than adding that statement, what part of the exterior do you feel that we did not assess? Because that's the comments that we would need to actually make a change in the.
I think it was under design. Does it say diminished? I think.
Yes,
For-
because
For exterior diminished, incorporating interior, we let exterior.
just because there are changes, which doesn't make it perfect. That doesn't mean that there isn't any integrity. It just means that, yes, there have been changes. But a diminished exterior doesn't necessarily negate its eligibility.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments from the commission before asking those online, asking the public? Open it up to public comment now. Mr. Zimmerman?
Yes, good afternoon, Commission, Vice Chair Hayes and city staff. I am speaking right now exclusively as a resident of Flagstaff. I live at 3001 North Chavine Boulevard. And I would like to make note that people come to Flagstaff for the climate and they come here for the culture. They come here for the historic feel and unique feel of Flagstaff. Flagstaff is rapidly losing historic properties. It's rapidly losing that sense of place that drives business, drives tourism, and drives satisfaction among the residents. I concur with, I agree with Council Member Garcia's comment that we need to do everything we can to preserve as much of the historic fabric of this city as we possibly can. And to that end, I would like to see as much fabric and material of the west elevation and the north elevation of the hotel retained in the new design. I don't really like as the council members had said, plaques and, a little tiny corner fireplace of Malpai stone. Doesn't really, doesn't mitigate the loss of the entire facade, right? It's just a little homage to destruction. So, as the developer goes through this, I understand you don't have to have a basement, but I would like to see the north elevation of the 2-story portion and the west elevation retained in the new design. So that way people from Flagstaff and other people that know this town well can walk by that hotel and say, oh yeah, I recognize this building. So without having to go inside and look at pictures of what's been lost or a little corner fireplace made of Malpai rock. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public?
When we offer up these mitigations, we can't really speak to exterior stuff that is further, again, outside of this process right now. But I do understand what you guys your frustration with plaques, but I think is maybe something to consider in this case versus some of the other ones that you were frustrated about, is that we're talking a lot about maintaining the facade of the Euro-American settlement in the downtown. How else, other than a plaque or something like that, could we actually signify what it is eligible for, which is its contribution for this movement, other than a plaque or something like that, or a brochure or something to that extent, like be open to some suggestions. We've mulled this over a lot, and we're trying to facilitate the history of it and not as well as the building, right?
Yeah, I would just add to that point that doing the measured drawings is great for when it's significant for the architecture. So that doing the phase 2 in the measure drawings helps with that end, but the interpretive functions for national criterion A and local B, it doesn't capture that. So doing a combination of mitigation measures that would capture the array is something to consider.
Because again, yeah, it is not just, well, it is absolutely a landmark, and that's not the only piece we're trying to capture as part of this resource study specifically, and the recommendations for eligibility of the building.
Can I make a comment that
yeah,
the SHPO,
You can't. I'm sorry. You're a member of the public in this meeting. You can't make a comment unless you're called on by the chair, and you've used your time. I'm sorry.
I can't call on anybody who has a further question to ask about what was provided by the presentation.
Not a member of the public. No, I mean, the commission can ask questions, but no, the public cannot jump in and ask questions unless they can only make statements during their 3 minutes of public comment. So, yeah.
And there isn't anyone else from the public to comment on this item. The only other person is the NAU representative for the next agenda item who's waiting, and then everyone else is staff or commission. And then, of course, Bill Collins, our official SHPO representative.
I guess for me, I agree that to interpret or, memorialize one aspect of integrity, having something interpretive is an appropriate way to do that. So I feel like we're discussing how to mitigate the impact to the other portion of integrity. Like, I feel like that's what we're wrangling with, is the impact to the integrity to criterion, City of Flagstaff criterion D at this point.
And as your study pointed out, and I'll quote it, while other buildings in Flagstaff display similar architectural elements, few others display them in this combination and at the scale and stature of the former City Hall building. So I think in terms of the architecture, that needs to be included in anything, including the importance of masonry in Flagstaff and the use of concrete with the masonry. The masons actually had design, you could identify masons, and I want to do this research, but different masons did different mortar styles. And so that needs to be acknowledged. All that's super important to understanding this building, because building by building, we're losing our masonry buildings, and they're very special to Northern Arizona and Flagstaff. So every time we lose one, it's a big loss. And this one is very special, as you acknowledge in your report.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I wish I had more information on the Masons. Unfortunately, these were likely Masons out of Phoenix. It was the people, as far as I can tell, the contract was awarded to a company out of Phoenix. They were the lowest bidder, with the exception of the jail. This is all in the report, that they got to do some of the internal jail features, but all of the work was done by their employees from out of, in this case. But that gets really tricky because, again, we don't have records. Not everything is, we don't have architectural drawings. The original drawings didn't have Malpai. Maybe they contracted out, but there was no public notice. There was no discussion of the papers. There was of using, other than the cost of the masonry. So as far as we can tell, what doesn't necessarily, from our position, doesn't diminish anything. We can't say that it was done by any Flagstaff Masons.
I know someone to ask. I'll see if I can find out.
I mean, it'd be useful for other buildings. Again, this isn't our first time here. We've done plenty of these, and that's always interesting data. But as far as we could tell here, it was possibly from an outside company.
I guess one other thing, if I would like to ask Mr. Collins, since he is here in official capacity from the SHPO's office, if he agrees with the recommendations for NRHP eligibility in the report.
Well, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, yes. We reviewed this earlier, the earlier draft, and although as you recall, it was requested to be revised, it was sufficient for us to come to the opposite conclusion that the report itself came to, which was that the building is eligible under A and likely eligible under criteria C, although as it's been stated, the interior aspects of it are not entirely understood, at least by us at that time. So the statements that we've heard that I really have nothing to contradict on the eligibility calls.
Bill, you weren't very clear. Could you repeat that? I think you were coming through very muffled. I
Oh.
only picked up about half.
I'm sorry, is that better?
No, that's worse.
I don't know what to say on that.
That, for a second, it was better.
Okay, I'll just try to speak up. How's that?
No.
No?
Worse.
No?
Bill, if I could, I heard you say at the end, which I think is the meat of it, that you do not have, with the revised report, you do not feel that you would contradict any of the findings that they made.
No.
Is that accurate? Okay.
That is correct.
I didn't understand any of the end, so that's really what I was listening for. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Well, I think, yes?
Commissioner Hayes, one of the questions I heard Cornerstone posed to the commission that's not resolved yet is how to address the criteria A portion of significance in the mitigation. And they said that they've struggled with it too. And I want to point out that one of the staff people here today who can be called up is Rose Toey, who's the liaison to the Indigenous Commission. So one consideration, if that's not something we feel ready to resolve tonight, is we could add to the checklist coordinating with another commission that has expertise and cultural competency, of course, and cultural real life lived experiences that might inform that mitigation. And if you'd like to hear from Rose on that, you can call on her as well.
I like that idea, particularly since with the history of the American Indian movement and the arrests and jails and investigations. So if Rose would like to speak, would like to call her up at this time. Thank you, Sarah, for that suggestion. I think that's a great idea for mitigation.
Good afternoon or evening, commissioners. And I really appreciate the time. My name is Rose Tohi, and I am the staff liaison to the Indigenous Commission here at the city. And my title is Indigenous Affairs Administrator. And I really appreciate that this could be a consideration, and I do encourage that. I think we have a multitude of community experience, but also the collective experience of our commission. So I would welcome that, and I can take that back to our commission and ask them to consider the sharing of the findings, as well as just advice and also some, hopefully, however it works for your commission would be great.
Thank you. And so, and talking about mitigations and that making a decision on that as part of the phase 1 study, how do we leave it open for some flexibility if we accept the phase 1 study with revisions to be submitted to the HPO, for instance? How do we have more discussion of the mitigations, or do we need to ask for revisions to be able to see proposed mitigations that might incorporate an Indigenous viewpoint on the American Indian movement and the ACLU's involvement in Flagstaff?
I think, as I said earlier, this can be the checklist. So you may not know how you want it resolved, but you could say that is something you want to see in order when the certificate of appropriateness is submitted. Earlier, way back in our 20 minutes
Yeah.
ago or something. I had said that as part of making your checklist, you could think about what's administrative and what comes back. And so things can come back not as part of the cultural resource study directly, but saying in the certificate of appropriateness, we want to understand how we want to see what the plan is for mitigation of this. And we encourage you to consult with our Indigenous Commission as a resource to do that. And then they would come back and explain how they did that, what that discussion was like, and how it's getting incorporated into the drawings and the layout of the building. I mean, that's one way to approach it. I know that takes another step, but I mean, the Indigenous Commission cannot make a decision about any of this. They can be advisors because the authority to make decisions about what's an approved certificate is going to come from this group. But we can use each other as resources and share the expertise of all the volunteers in the city carefully. So it would be, staff would of course help set that up, but that might be a way to resolve if we're not, to keep this moving forward, even if we're not sure how we want to resolve criteria A in the mitigation. So I think that helps you, just saying like it gives them time. You're probably not going to see that certificate of appropriateness for several months. It's not going to be back next month because they're not, as Jim said, they're not in that spot right now.
Right.
So I mean that gives them some things to keep working on.
Well, I like that idea an awful lot to mitigate that for that criterion A. I think that's, something that is also lacking a little bit downtown in a history that a lot of us didn't know about. So I think that's great. So when we make a decision for whether to accept this report on to our recommendations, we can just ask that be prepared in coordination with the Indigenous community as part of our recommendation. I'm sorry, the Indigenous Commission.
Yes, yeah, I think if you you could structure that it would probably be like, for example, Rose and I could present proposed mitigation to the Indigenous Commission in between meetings here, and then bring those findings back.
So a collaborative thing, and then we would see the proposals and make a decision if that meets what we consider to be a mitigation for the certificate of appropriateness. So we are at that time. I know it's been a long time, but to make a decision on whether we are accepting the requested action or the recommended action on the agenda are any with revisions. So does anyone have a motion? Okay, did I do?
Well, I was just gonna say, I think you'll want to incorporate everything together. So maybe to break it down, we start first with, does on the report itself, in terms of requiring any additional things in the report, it sounds like there's general agreement with the findings and the research and the documentation for a phase 1, possibly just making the corrections suggested by Commissioner Westheimer, which as they are minor, could probably be ones that you could defer to the HPO for approval, or you could ask to have those minor corrections made and it come back to the commission for approval. But unless there's additional information to talk about here, it seems like that's the general direction. So I think that would be the first step. And then the second would be which mitigation. So it seems like you're leaning towards interpretive mitigation for national criteria A, local criteria B, to be developed in collaboration with the Indigenous Commission, and leaning towards doing
Cultural resource phase 2 study.
phased measured drawings and archival level photography of a phase 2 study. And I think the archival photography could also probably cover Commissioner Westheimer's comment on getting better photos. So
So do we feel comfortable with a motion to accept the Phase 1 study with revisions and spelling corrections as pointed out, and to request measured drawings, archival photos of part of a Phase 2, and mitigations to address the National Register A criteria and Flagstaff B criteria, including collaboration with the Indigenous Commission to incorporate that in an interpretation into the future building?
I would like to request some confirmation from staff that if we approve this study and with what the chair has said, the building will still be there. Cannot be demolished until they get a certificate of appropriateness, because we had lost 2 buildings for this project.
Correct, but as those weren't significant,
Had no
it
intent.
followed a different process. But that's correct. They will not have approval for demolition after, no matter what you decide tonight, they won't have approval for the demolition at this phase.
So I never really pay attention to much when Emily does this. I can make the motion and state all of these things and everybody. Okay, do you want to make the motion?
Yeah, I just want to revisit, is there any other, like, you know, I don't think anyone, I don't care to have like a little Malpais memorial in the corner of a building. I was not interested in that part. I don't think anybody else was either. I just want to make sure there's no other mitigations to the architectural portion that anyone wants to consider.
I would like to see Malpais used in the building myself. But also I think a mitigation, Sarah's probably going to shoot me down for this, would be to have the cultural resource study added to the city website. And if that costs the developer money, I don't know how much that would be, but I think that if we're going to lose the building or whatever's going to happen, it's going to change the whole setting and feeling of that part of downtown. That information of what that building was and the history associated with it needs to be available to the public.
Commissioner Westheimer, could the motion be to submit the final study to the library to be held as part of the Flagstaff archive? I mean, I think sometimes these reports don't fit the purpose of our Flagstaff City archive at the library, but this document, I think, would. And so we could send it to the library for curation, essentially. And then that is a resource that's like scanned and kept in the library listings, correct?
It would be in the catalog, but
Yeah.
but you recently, and I wanted to thank staff for adding the Loy family history onto the city website. That's awesome. How did that happen? So let's just keep that going, because that and May Hicks, we are starting to add city information onto our city website.
And that was part of a mitigation measure requiring the plaque, and had a QR code, and Cornerstone designed that plaque as well. And the QR code linked to additional information that is housed on the city website. So that could be part of the interpretation, and I don't know exactly. I mean, I'm sure Jim may also be open to housing the report somewhere in the graduate, but sure. Yes, go ahead, Caitlin.
So yeah, we could absolutely do the QR code to get it on the city website as well, but I think we could also request that, I think we could add the mitigation that we request agencies, such as potentially SHPO, such as potentially the Klein Library. We can't make any of them do, but we can request that this be housed there for public. We could also host it on our website. We could do all of the above. I think making it available, obviously that's what we all aim to do, so.
Right. So could we say that we would like it to be made available to different resources in the state of Arizona to be proposed, because I think Arizona memory, but I'm not really certain, all of which ones would be appropriate and make
Yeah,
that
maybe-
decision tonight. So maybe the proposal comes from during the phase 2 study, if there's that phase 2 study.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list of people at the Arizona Historical Society. There's lots of places that we could ask them to.
Mhm.
But as far as but if we did a plaque or something similar to like that with the QR code, it could be.
Personally, I think the public, we can do more than one because it's digital, but Arizona Historical Society barely has a footprint here these days, which is a whole nother topic. But we're going to reopen the Pioneer Museum. So hooray for that. But I think the city, this is occurring because of the city zoning code and the city goals and policies. And I think it should be on the city website. And if it's cataloged at the library, that would be great as well, because that will help people find it. So I think both those two are appropriate. Klein, great, because it's here. But I think the city and the public library are two great places for it.
Klein is very easy to search online. Yeah.
Because on top of the fact that professionally, not only would I like it to be acceptable to the public, but also to accessible for us professionals. A lot of the information, as we've discussed, and a lot of this stuff is not. So the more that is, it's great for us, great for the community, great for everyone.
I guess my personal experience is that Klein is a state facility, and who knows what the state will decide about that facility in the future. But our city is our city, and our city library is our city library, and that's why I personally prefer those.
Commissioner Buckham has had her hand up for a while. I'm sorry, Abby, I don't see you from the side.
It's
not on
okay.
the screen in front of me.
I just wanted to say that I would like to see the stone incorporated. And then also as the person who does collection management for the public library, that is something I can certainly look into see if that is within our collection development policy, if that's something we would take.
So to clarify, you would like to see the stone incorporated in the interior of the building or someplace else?
Interiors, I mean, I would just like it included in general, but yes, the interior is fine as well.
So we can include that, and then we'll have an opportunity to review the proposed design at a later time if we include that now.
One thing I want to ask and clarify, because it's come up in a different case as well, is when you're saying you want to see the Malpai stone incorporated, is it important it be the stone on the outside now, or that it be stone that is similar? Because I know we tried to salvage stone off of a building north of hospital, and it was just unsalvageable. It just pulverized as soon as they pulled it off the building. Some of these volcanic stones, once you start breaking them into pieces to pull them off, they're so hard, and they don't come apart that easy. So I'm just bringing that up as a technical consideration, since we've had a failed attempt at salvage with this exact material on a different historic building. So I'm just bringing it up to see where everybody's interest lies.
I think it makes the point at how the quality of that construction, right? It doesn't come apart easily, and we shouldn't throw it away. We should continue to use it.
Commissioner Buckham, you have your hand up?
Oh, I was going to say, I mean, salvageable is always preferable, but if we can get similar stone, then I would also be comfortable with that.
I also find that acceptable because it's a stone that's characteristic of Flagstaff. That actual stone may not be, but it is nice if you can salvage it. It may just be more expensive to try to salvage it too, even if it doesn't crumble.
Well, and this case that Sarah brought up, I mean, they were hand chiseling it,
Yeah.
and they just couldn't get enough of the mortar off to have it look nice. And that's still
right.
That will come back as an approval eventually, still being worked out what the replacement mitigation will be. But that's for another day.
So at this time, we can just leave it as Malpai stone and see what's proposed. Okay, since it's been a little while, let me see if I can propose this again. Go ahead.
I just want to clarify which things the HPO is going to review and which things we want to have come back to the commission. So I will see the Malpais will see as part of the certificate of appropriateness step. So that will come back to us. But
Correct.
the other things, like, do we want to see the phase 2 cultural resource study to have that come back? I mean, it'll be focusing on the architectural documentation, but that to come back to us as well.
Yeah, and my assumption was that that came back to us as part of a process for review anyways, and then
Correct.
on to the
Yeah.
certificate of appropriateness. Okay. And with that, the measured drawings and whatnot, we can also at that time hear about any other work that's been done on mitigations, correct? Or proposals, like if this is like something they're working on, so we can talk about it in discussion.
Yes.
If they
right.
have it.
Like whatever the proposed
Sort of update.
Event criterion A/B. Yes, that could come back at the same time.
Sarah?
One thing I want to point out is that as we're talking about this, it came to mind by what Commissioner Horton just said, is that usually in a site plan or in a certificate of appropriateness application, they're not interior drawings, but we are having some conversations here about interior mitigation of exterior loss and what needs to be on the inside and the outside, which is important in this case. There is on that application the ability of the HPO to require anything else that's necessary, but I'm just kind of making sure we verbalize that there will be the expectation that there's going to have to be a more deep, for this kind of mitigation, we're going to have some of those interior concepts, I guess. And if you have anything to add about your expectations on the level of detail for those, that might help the applicant prepare them so that they're not, we call it the rock game sometimes, like bring me a rock, bring me a pink rock, bring me a rock that's shinier. Like let's see if we can help the
Right.
first rock that they bring be the correct
They
one.
have an idea what we're thinking.
Yeah. What are we thinking? And that helps Lauren to know if she's got a complete submission.
And just one more point of clarification. I did hear from what I've heard too so far, especially Commissioner Buckham, with incorporating Malpais stone, you're comfortable with interior or exterior if they did say want to like recreate the stone planters outside into the new design, that you would be comfortable with that too. It didn't necessarily have to be some kind of monument on the inside.
Myself personally, I would like to see some incorporation in the design of Malpais stone on the outside. I think that I would be more favorable to like a design that has that material. That material is so Flagstaff.
I agree. And we look at, with Flagstaff criteria, we look at the exterior. So to me, it needs to be on the exterior, not on the interior. It can also be on the interior, but in my opinion, should be on the exterior.
By doing that in a way too, I mean, if we're losing a part of history, we're tying it a little bit in with something newer. There's a tie back to the past, and something that is Flagstaff instead of sort of off the shelf design that's similar to other places. So, for the stone, we are open to interior and exterior, and that gives them an opportunity to propose design options, correct? That we have an opportunity at the certificate of appropriateness to review. So, go ahead.
We prefer, some of us feel strongly about preferring exterior, or at least including exterior.
So that wasn't in the original mitigation in the study, so I'll include that. We would like to see proposals for exterior, inclusion of Malpais stone, if salvageable, possible. We can hear a proposal on the feasibility of that. If not, Malpais stone that looks similar to what we see here in City Hall and what is in the old City Hall is built out of.
It would be nice if they could match the mortar style.
I can't remember the mortar style on the City Hall. Okay, well, we can include that. We'll have more the Malpais stone in kind or similar to the style that is on the existing building right now, with proposals of whether or not it's salvaged or it is Malpais stone that's new. New rocks, which are not new.
If you just left that out, it's implied, just Malpais stone. one way or the
Malapai
other
Stone.
instead of if you
Yeah,
were
I
trying to shorten your motion.
Yeah, I think there's this discussion time can be referenced, in the video
Yes.
for a long while, long enough that we're going to see this again, and we'll make sure we can
And
capture some of
I
this.
see Jim is still on and listening, and Cornerstones is here. So, and there is the video for reference. So,
Right. Well,
the-
but yeah, so you don't have to add every detail in the motion, just make sure the motion captures enough, and then we'll, try and stay as true as possible to that. And some of this might be important enough to end up, make sure we're putting those clarifications of this discussion in the minutes.
so Amy, would you like to make the motion? If not, I
Yep.
will.
I have one final clarifying question. The interpretive mitigation for the, that's going to be developed in, with the Native American Commission. Are we comfortable with that, the HPO doing final review of that, or do we want to see that again as well?
I would like to see that.
Okay.
Me too.
Okay, I move to accept the Phase 1 Cultural Resource Study for 19 West Birch Avenue with the grammatical corrections noted by Commissioner Westheimer to be approved by the HPO, with a Phase 2 Cultural Resource Study to focus on architectural documentation to include archival grade photography, as-built drawings, and elevation drawings to be reviewed by this commission, with interpretive mitigation for the NRHPA criteria A to be developed in conjunction with the Native American Commission and to be reviewed by this commission, and with Malpais rocks incorporated into the building, preferably the exterior, preferably salvaged, to be reviewed during the certificate of appropriateness review.
And can I add a suggestion, or do we have?
And to archive the both cultural resource studies phases 1 and 2 in a place where they will be publicly accessible, preferably the City of Flagstaff library and or website.
All in favor?
Second.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Any abstentions? All right, we got there. Second item on the agenda. Now I have to find where we are. Yes, can we take a 5-minute break?
Of course you may.
It's 6:39, so come back at 6:45. That's 6 minutes. It is 6:46, and are we all here, or are there people tardy? No, we're all here. We are, and I have to find my place on the agenda.
So we're moving on to 7A general business.
There we go. All right, so we have 7A general business, and this is our visitor online, correct?
Correct, yes. This is
Welcome.
Taylor.
Thank you for being so patient. Go ahead with your presentation.
Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and share. Can everybody see, sorry, everybody see my screen? Let me make this bigger.
Yes.
The thing is right in front of it. Okay. So, really, I'll just try and make this quick because I don't want to keep everybody longer for the things that I have. But I'm really just here today to establish sort of information, I guess, a partnership possibly for the future. And just to clarify, this isn't something that's happening until spring officially. So I'm a little bit early, but I'm just trying to get things done over the summer. I am a lecturer of English at NAU, and I teach the 105, just the required writing class, and I've received a couple of grants. And with those grants, I'm improving my courses so that they're more community-based, more research-based for the students so they can get more connection with important topics and sort of learning how to expand their voices from talking about important issues to actually, hopefully, making changes even on a small scale. So I'll just go through. Why is this not working? There, I guess I have to scroll. Okay, so this looks like a lot, but each slide is pretty short. So I'll just intro the project, just involve parties, curriculum timeline, what I would be asking for from the commission, and some of the benefits, goals, some of the funding that I have, and then just any questions that you guys have. And again, thank you for letting me be here and sort of talk to you about this project. So essentially,
just so you
yes.
know, you don't have to hurry really quick because we had a long agenda item before you. Just so.
Yeah, no, I know it doesn't have to take too long. So I'm okay. Also telling myself not to take too long. I've received a couple of grants, one of which is a CURE grant, that's improving student experience with research early on. So most of the students I teach are freshmen. So essentially I'm doing this project where they are asked to create a proposal to fix an issue. And in the fall, we're doing it at the NAU level, so just on NAU campus. And then in the spring is when I'm expanding it out to the community level. And then the reason I'm kind of waiting until spring to start that is just so I can establish these relationships, sort of get my feet wet with the project, and then before, expanding it out to a much bigger area for students. But I teach about 60 students per semester, most of them are freshmen, and it's a wide variety of majors. So lots of interests. So I try to give them the opportunity to really explore within those and develop some skills that eventually would be helpful for the real world, for careers and things like that. The main people involved with the project is me as the grant recipient. And then I have a grant assistant. I don't have a picture for him yet, but he's getting, the paperwork is getting done right now for that position. He's one of the grad students at NAU, and he will be helping me he'll help act as a liaison for community partners that are willing to kind of work with us, and then also just assisting students with applying for their own grants, applying for conferences, things like that. And then, of course, city partners, of which I have talked to a couple so far. So I have talked with the Beautification Arts and Sciences program and the Indigenous Commission. They're the ones that have, I went to meetings with them as well, and kind of confirmed their interest in sort of helping be partners. And I'll sort of go over in a minute what I mean by that, like, collaboration. I do want to kind of preface it by saying I'm not asking for like a ton of involvement, more so just connection, so that I'm not someone who's super knowledgeable about all of the things within the city and the Flagstaff area. I've only lived here for about 2 years, and so I want to mainly establish contacts that I could potentially connect students who are interested with. Other people that I've talked with, obviously, Heritage Preservation Commission right now, and then I have been in contact with some of the other commissions, but I know that everyone is super busy, so I haven't been able to set up meetings yet. Hopefully do that in the next couple months. For curriculum timeline. So this is what the class looks like, just to kind of give you some information on how that will go. First, I don't know where this picture came from. Sorry, I just realized there's a picture on here. I don't know where that came from. But first, the students do a self-reflection on their experiences with body rhetoric. So essentially accessibility, presentation, representation, times when they felt excluded or included. And then they move on to the next paper, which is a rhetorical analysis of an issue that they have observed in the community in this case. So maybe it could be something as simple as they realize that, like, there needs to be a railing next to some stairs or something like that. It could be anything that simple, all the way to, we should have more murals, or we need more bike racks, or things like that. It could be really anything. Again, I have students with a wide range of majors and interests, graphic design, psychology, engineering, city planning, sort of interests and things there. So some might be very applicable and some might be more, interest-based. And then after that, they form groups of 3 to 5 students each, and then they are deciding together on the ones that they've observed, or a different one if they found one after they wrote their initial rhetorical analysis paper. They identify an issue they actually want to move forward with, trying to create a proposal for. And then that fourth thing, the last thing that they do in the class, is create a proposal for solving that issue. And that includes things like timeline, budget, steps, stakeholders. It's pretty detailed professional document that, and I've done it a little bit in the past with just kind of more broad, like, oh, it could be your home city, could be anywhere. And now I'm really narrowing it down to here where we can actually even go out together and see these things. And if there potentially was something that their proposal was moved forward and they got a grant for it and it was changing the community, we can actually go out and see that success. And then with that, they have a project as well, but that's sort of flexible with how they can do the project option. So essentially in January, they'll be doing some self-reflection. February, some they'll be observing, going around, looking around the city, walking around. And I'm hoping it was funny with the Beautification Arts and Sciences Commission, they pointed out that that might be a good time to see some interesting infrastructure issues that are happening in the wintertime in Flagstaff, which I hadn't particularly thought about. I just, there's only two semesters that I teach the course. And then March is when they start to build those foundation documents, do more detailed research together as a team. And then April and May is when they actually write the proposal, do the project, give a presentation. And so from the city partner side, for various commissions that would be interested in being involved, or just, kind of having, some information here and there that they could help with, you guys would be providing any kind of support that you can during kind of March through May. And the way that I see that support is really just like, it could be as simple as like they send an email asking a question, to somebody on the commission who, maybe has a little bit more know-how in that area. Really, the students, I just want them to be able to speak with real city representatives who have the information about what the processes look like. Like, for example, here, I had never been to, I've been to a few commission, meetings before this, but just listening to the whole process that went into just the first step of establishing, here's this building going to be demolished, build a hotel, sort of that whole process and all of the people and interests and everything that goes into that. And even just attending a meeting for the students, I think would be very eye-opening for them. So it could be anywhere from, like I said, sending an email, or even they prepare something to present at one of the meetings, or they just have a meet one-on-one with someone from the commission. And again, this would be in teams. And I'll say real quick, I don't intend that every single student would be in contact with you guys. They would be picking topics, and I'm going to be asking them to pick like their preferred topic and then like a backup one, so that I can make sure that there's a good balance. And like I said, I'm talking with multiple commissions, so it's sort of meant to be spread out, depending on what project they choose. Like, I have a good amount of Indigenous students in my classes every semester. And if they were interested in doing something more on that side, they'd probably be more in communication with Indigenous commission, if that makes sense. Or if they were an art student and they wanted to make a mural, they might be more in contact with the Beautification Arts and Sciences program. And so there's a lot of students who are interested in historical things. And I think the idea of preservation would be very interesting to them, especially in conjunction with things like, we still want to be sustainable and all of these other aspects. So there will only be 15 groups total. And of those 15 groups, I don't foresee more than maybe like 4 groups being in contact. And I can also limit that as well. I know different commissions have different times where they're super busy because of grants and things like that. And if I knew that, oh, hey, we can only really talk to like 1 or 2 groups, or, answer questions from 1 or 2 groups at a time, I could actually do that myself, like limit it to like, these are the 2 groups that are going to be in connection here. So really what I'm here today is not to ask for anything super big, just to kind of place the idea in front of you that my students may be interested in doing a project that would require just some communication from somebody who actually knows things. Because like I said, I got 60 students and they're all going to be doing different projects, and I want them to have good, valuable information. Whereas in the past, I have only really been able to provide sort of surface level things, just because I'm not in the thick of it. And so I think that would be super beneficial, obviously, for them. Possibly they could be future commission members, just people who want to get more involved. I want them to see that they can, I'll just switch to this. I want them to be able to see about the processes, be aware of community needs. A lot of it's talking about audience, like how will you convince, like if you were going to ask for a grant to do this project, to make more signage in this area or whatever, how do you get them to, agree that that's something that they should move forward with, especially if there's other people who are also asking for money or things like that. And my students, they always have such great ideas and goals and dreams. It's the actual, how do we move this to something that will actually happen, that they sometimes struggle with. And so I'm trying to bridge that gap there. Just kind of professional skills, communication skills, super big, whether that be, like I said, in person, over the phone, via email, having to actually go out and walk around and look at things. Obviously for NAU, trying to also strengthen that relationship with the community. And I would like to do this in future semesters as well, not just in the spring, but I foresee myself doing it in the fall and spring as well, and kind of maybe combining it so they could choose things on campus or things in the city. But right now I'm trying to do one at a time before I sort of open up that can of worms. Community goals, we're amplifying community voices, better representation and acknowledgement of those issues. And then I definitely could see a good amount of students maybe choosing maybe a more digital sort of solution to something, digital tools or things like that. So that would be something that would be available as well. And I did receive a couple of grants, one of which they're not very big. They're kind of small grants, especially when I listen to the numbers that I know are, most city things are costing. But I would be limiting what my students are doing to be something sort of, I would say, doable. A lot of times they want to do things like, oh, we need more gym space. Let's build a whole new gym. And I'm like, okay, so good deal, but like we don't have enough time to like really flush out that whole proposal. And also that's going to be, millions of dollars. And so I will be putting a cap on it. I'm still deciding if it'll be like $1,000 to $3,000. So it'll be really small things. Then we'll have to be creative. Maybe we have to get some volunteers in some of these areas. But I do have this Humanities in Action grant that I got. It's only about $1,500, which would probably only be enough to maybe have like a community event where they present those proposals, and just sort of their ideas, or funding for maybe small project implementation, website domains, things like that. And then possibly funding for visiting speakers, for anything like that. And speaking of visiting speakers, I would love, and of course, again, just interested to hear the kind of bandwidth you guys would have for something like this, but it would be great to have either in person or just Teams in for like 5 minutes, someone from the commission who could sort of introduce themselves and say, hey, this is what our commission does. And like, if you have questions about this, me or whoever would be the person to kind of reach out to. Here's an email, or here's a way to get in contact with us, or something like that. Would be super valuable, because I'm just trying to get more people involved, have them meet more people, see more people who can share information like this with them, rather than just, me kind of, slideshowing it all. If the commission was interested in sort of being part of this process, I could definitely get, by like end of February, the amount of groups that might be interested. Like, it's probably going to be 2 groups, 3 groups, however many, so that you guys have a good idea of like what is coming. I can provide anything else that you might need as far as that information. Sorry, this is sort of like a fire hose overview of everything, but I'm sort of still putting it all together right now. And I mainly would just, some singular person, or just commission in general, who would be willing to be sort of stay in connection with me, and possibly I can directly refer students to. Like I said, I want them to be also practicing some professional communication. And, a lot of them are new to college. And so I think it's very valuable for them to get that experience. But that's generally what I just wanted to present about today. Thanks again for letting me come and sort of share this idea. And I'm definitely, any questions that you have, I can answer those, or any concerns that you want to raise would be fine as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Something that came to mind, a public event. Did the mayor not say May was going to be Historic Preservation Month? So if there was something that somebody was interested in doing with historic preservation, if any of the students were interested in that, and they're doing something in May, that's the first thought that came to my mind.
Yeah, and these are definitely things that I want to share with my students, because I don't want them to one of the things I want them to do is branch out to different events and things. And so they will have someone helping them apply for these types of things. So students whose projects are relevant in that area, I would definitely have them look into that. I was mainly thinking of like something more on a smaller level for all the students themselves, because they'll be kind of doing a lot of different things with different commissions.
And I was thinking contributing to something if the city does do an event and we still have to like learn more about that. I think in May we learned that the mayor said that, hey, we're going to have Preservation Month next May, right? So if some
It
student
was
want to,
this year, and we could
Oh.
propose, it's just, we'd have to redo it every year, ask for the proclamation, but I did this year to declare May as Preservation Month following the National Preservation Month, but we definitely could do that again next year. And, incorporate outside groups.
I didn't know if there was plans. So
No, I mean, there are it is Nationally Preservation Month, and then I don't know if we know it'll be May. It's all very TBD, but potentially the State Historic Preservation Conference will be here in May of next year, if all the stars align.
Yeah, I mean, something like that would be definitely great for them to be part of. I know that some students get really into their projects and they actually want to move them forward. And part of this process of connecting with people who are actually, involved with this stuff in the city would be finding out which projects are already like in motion. Because I can see a lot of them looking around and kind of picking obvious things and then learning, oh, this is already something that people have been working on for like 2 years. A lot of times they pick things, that they've picked things in the past that someone already has a plan for. And so part of this would be, oh, hey, that's a great idea, but also someone's already kind of working on that thing. So you might want to look in this area or this other very specific sub part of that issue. And so having them get involved with actual projects would be, I think, something they'd be open to as well.
Next year is going to be the 100th anniversary of Route 66. I don't know exactly what planning is in the works at this point, but that'll be something that's happening. And I also want to say thanks for your patience in sitting through this meeting. It's definitely longer than usual, and you picked an especially feisty one to sit in on as well. So
it's always good. I always learn a lot. So I think, it's definitely a good experience.
And I guess my question is, what are you thinking as far as like how we would be interacting with these teams? Like, would it be during commission meetings, outside of them? Like how many times? What kind of time commitment do you envision?
I can work with whatever time the commission wants to give. It could be as limited as you need it to be, or it could be expanded more. That's one of the things I'm kind of trying to establish at this point, because I think it's a really valuable conversation I can have with my students about like, hey, these are all the things that they're doing and they really only have this amount of time. So make sure that you use that wisely. If they can only email you once every 3 weeks, make sure that your emails, are set up in a way that allow for that to be, valuable use of your time. Don't be sending text emails, which, is a whole thing we talk about. Or, if there was someone on the commission who was like, oh, I'm really interested in this and I would actually love to meet with them in person, then, that's something that would be great as well. Again, I don't have a hard and fast rule. Each commission I've talked to has had a different amount of interest and a different amount of time that they would be willing to dedicate. And part of what I'm doing is trying to figure out what that is so that I'm prepared in the spring, so that I'm not just pushing, like, hey, they're going to be calling you every single day, so that I kind of know what would be reasonable to expect and what I can communicate to my students is reasonable for them to expect. So I could see one group, maybe they are doing something pretty small and they just have a couple questions via email, that it could be just a one email. I could see a group of students that's like super passionate and wants to get super involved, and they might even want to come to multiple commission meetings. Again, I don't want to take up a ton of your time, and I wouldn't want my students to take up too much of that time. And so I would probably err on the side of more limited time requirement. Especially because they would be split between different commissions as far as what their projects are. So, and I don't know what your guys' schedule generally looks like in that time period, like March-ish time period. But I could always touch base with you again if the commission, if this is something that you think would be interesting to stay in collaboration with. But I could always touch base again, like, early in 2026, sort of like, hey, this is what it's looking like right now. What should I communicate to them as far as this? Or if someone, like I said, wanted to take a couple minutes to talk to the classes. There's 3 of them, but 1 or 3, or even a recorded message or whatever, about the process. That could even be a good establishment of, hey, this is how, this is what you would expect. If you do reach out to us, this is what you could expect, as far as like, oh, we might respond within a couple weeks, or we might have to set up a meeting if it's this type of issue or whatever.
So it's really kind of non-committal until there's the proposal of this is what I want to do, because it's really up to the student of what their vision is.
Yes,
And
yeah,
they
and
could propose it to us. So if we say, yeah, we're interested, we're
Yes.
interested in looking at a
Mhm.
proposal and we're willing to be partners. But if somebody comes in and they have a big commitment that we have day jobs, so
Yes,
if somebody
exactly.
can't, commit
Yes,
to that,
exactly.
then we let them know when they propose that.
Yeah, and I
Or
would
they reach
communicate
out
that with them.
earlier in the development phase and see if it's something.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I want to give them as much information as soon as possible. And so that would honestly be also just a great experience for them to be able to see, like, hey, depending on what the bandwidth is of other groups, and even learning, like, what is a commission? The people who work on the commission have, jobs outside of the commission. And so they don't have all your time. And that's even something that I have to talk with them about, is being a teacher as well. But yeah, that's definitely something that would also help, just they can reach out, and then it can also be like, hey, we don't really, have the time for this, or hey, this is going to be a better direction for you to go in, or, anything like that from your end, from the commission's end, would be totally fine by me. Again, mainly what I'm establishing here, especially since this will be the first semester, the spring will be the first semester that I'm fully running the class this way, is little or as much. All of it will work well. All of it will be better than just me trying to give them all of this information from the perspective of someone who hasn't been on a commission and who also hasn't lived in Flagstaff that long. So like I said, I like the way that you put it, was very probably a good way of going about it. Just kind of like, here's some, and I even could be, for that initial email, I could even be like, hey, here's some of the projects. Which ones should I refer? Which ones would make the most sense?
Ms. Dector?
I'd just like to offer a quick bit of feedback. I get a lot of emails from NAU students as a staff person, because I have a lot of public facing projects. And one thing I would say that students in this kind of class might need to clearly identify, that many students don't, is that they are like, they need to like make sure they say like, I'm enrolled in this class and I'm part of the class is da 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 da, and this is what I'm doing. Because often they just send a question. And one of the things staff is trained to do is that if we get a question from a journalist or a journalism student, which there are some at NAU, our procedure is that has to go through our public affairs department first and just be vetted by that staff. And so sometimes I've run into an issue where a student is unclear and they start a communication with me, and I think I have to send this upstairs to public affairs before I can answer it, when really they're just asking, and it's not like this is going to be like published on a website, or that they're asking staff to like endorse their grant proposal or anything like that. But people get internally really, worried about those things, because there's a history of NAU students, due to the fact that they're learning and this is not something they're yet experienced at, knowing that kind of creates, there might be internal expectations about how we handle requests. So I think working with commissioners is really good. I think also being really clear about, if it's public facing, is it going to end up in a newspaper article? Could there be a grant application in the future? Like, those are things I think that just for all students in this kind of situation, it's very helpful if they're reminded to get all that thought through and put in their email up front, and not like, I'll shoot this email off and see what happens later. Because, when we get trained internally, we get really suspicious of that, because sometimes we end up on some wild goose chases. Sometimes we can't really help. Sometimes, people aren't identifying themselves as journalists. And so that's part of our training too, just because, we want to make sure that if it's something that's going to be public facing, that it's dealt with appropriately for our internal policies. So like, that is, I think, the hard part about like working with city staff. So I think it really is an interesting idea of like working with commissioners, because you guys are all volunteers and you're just speaking from your experience, but I definitely have seen students who've kind of floundered because they like got a very short period of time, like really 3.5 months to get something going. And then they like hit a roadblock just because they don't understand that someone on the staff might have perceived them as like maybe they work for KNAU or maybe they work for the lumberjack and am I getting questions from a journalist? Like we want to make sure we have all those good relationships. But students sometimes I think don't have clarity around how to introduce themselves and what they're doing in that context.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely something that we talk about a lot already in my classes, but would be a big thing here. And part of the reason I'd like to establish contact on my own first, because I know a lot of them, like I said, sort of avoiding that texting style email where they just send like, no subject, random question. Who are you? What do you want? Sort of thing. Definitely something that I try to train them on. And that part of the process would be actually working with me or with my grant assistant on how to properly send an email with all of that information, and them knowing, my students knowing that I've already established contact about this sort of project idea with the commission, I think will provide them with a lot more I guess, confidence in that area to be like, okay, so I can send this email and I can put all this information. It's not going to be like too much fire hose. Cause I think a lot of times with my students, they don't want to send too much information at once because they feel like that's like overwhelming. Whereas in this situation, that's actually would be more helpful to just have all the information there up front. So like you said, kind of know what they're asking for, what they're trying to do. And like I said, me having that already established that sort of collaborative relationship would help show them like, hey, I've already established this. So just give all of the information about your project, everything that you need to ahead of time so that they have all the information and you don't have to go ping pong back and forth a million times because that's going to take forever. And so, like you said, it's limited time. So yeah, definitely something that I'm aware of and always working on with my students, and especially in a capacity where they would send an email to a more professional body rather than just me or a peer. That would be something I would talk to them about for sure.
Yeah, I think the ping ponging is it seems like it's helping because they're, like you said, I understand that perspective, not doing the fire hose. But yeah, a lot of times that means it feels like it puts the burden on the recipient of the email to like pull out of them what they actually need. And I know that that's like a more difficult professional skill to learn. And so I think that part of it too is I really appreciate you coming to something like this because it also brings the commission and staff into like the learning process. Like, can we help them learn how to do this and give them some real world practice?
Yeah. Yeah, and a lot of the assignments that I have in the class are meant to build towards these skills. And I haven't established it yet. I'm going to kind of see how it goes in the fall with just for NAU things, but I might even have one of, their smaller assignments be like, show me the email, submit the email and you get a grade on that. Okay, hey, it's good to go. You can send that. That would be probably something useful to them as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You have a question? So is this something that maybe it would be a suggestion that maybe a student, if they're interested in working with this commission, because they get to choose right through a few commissions, maybe come to one of our meetings and sit in the back and listen and see the kind of things we discuss, because you just hear Heritage Preservation Commission and it could be a really broad range of things, but mostly we get grant applications and then today's the agenda item before you spoke was a particularly complex one. Usually most of them are pretty simple.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I've already had kind of that idea of like in the first sort of 2 phases where they are sort of developing and exploring and observing. One of the readings, as it were, would be to pick, 2 or 3 different maybe commissions or whatever body that they're considering working with and attend those meetings as they're reading, take notes, decide, that's already something I already was considering. So I think that would be great and a good way for them to sort of, from the back burner first before they dive into it.
And most commissions are videoed in on YouTube, correct?
Yeah. So again, they could also watch the recordings. Yeah.
So they could watch ours or Open Spaces or anyone to see if that's something that they want to do a project on.
Yes. Yeah. And that's always helpful because they all have different schedules. So that's something I've also thought about.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, just because they do have a compressed amount of time to do this, and if they have to wait to go to all the commission meetings to turn, but yeah, I'd be interested in that. I'd be interested in, yeah, assisting them, and I think for the reasons you outlined, just to foster interest in heritage preservation and community involvement, and I think all the reasons that we're sitting in on this commission, that we want to encourage other young people to do that as well.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear.
Can I quickly suggest too, they
Mhm.
might not need to come to a commission meeting, but if you took them to the city website where we post of all of our commission videos, they could watch a commission video from the previous 3 months on the ones they're the most interested in.
Yeah.
And look at it that way instead. That way they don't, that way it's like a assignment they're ready to do on day one. Did you watch like 2 or 3 commission videos
Yeah.
this week?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's something I think. Yeah, for sure. I usually have to show them. I usually have to show them how to find things. So I've sort of built it in, here's where you go. This is the website. It's linked in their learning management system so they can easily find it. And then I can actually see who actually clicks on links and who actually went and looked at them and those kinds of things. And I wonder if there's even a way, if it's a YouTube recording, I could embed it into the course itself. So that's, even more easy access for them. But yeah, I think that would be a great idea. And I definitely am having that as one of the required things that they have to do.
Yeah,
Yeah, and-
Sarah Langley, our public affairs director, might be able to offer advice on that because her staff manages our YouTube page. Like every commission has its own playlist and so she might be able to offer some suggestions.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm sorry, someone asking a question because I can't hear if you are.
Your mic was going on and off, I think. The light blinked a few times.
Taylor, are
can
you able to hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Would you like to use my mic, Amy?
Is this one working?
I can hear you now.
That one's sticky.
Okay, yeah, you can hear me. No, I would just say that once they pick a commission, it might be useful for them to attend in person, because my perception is that Gen Z interacts with lots with screens, and it's a very different experience to be here in person than to be at home watching. I mean, just for even commissioners, it's a very different experience to be here in person than to be participating from home.
Yes, yeah, I would agree. And as much as is in my power, I try to come, well, they'll obviously have to kind of go around the city, actually observe the issues that they want to address. But also I can see them sort of splitting up those duties. So it might just be a couple people from their group of 3 to 5. It might not be all of them, but I can definitely, sort of make that a requirement or, heavily encourage that, because I also agree. They do a lot better with kind of paying attention, being engaged if it's something in person rather than just watching through a screen every single time that they are trying to learn information. A lot of it turns into, is there a transcript for this? ChatGPT, summarize it for me. So that's one of the big pushes with this. In the past, I've allowed them to pick proposals for issues that are kind of, could be from their hometown or whatever. And so they don't, since they're here in Flagstaff, they can't, usually go and walk around and actually observe that issue. So they have done a lot in the past. And I have found that it's a lot harder to be, I think, practical from that approach from their end. So in person is definitely always something I encourage.
Well, thank you. And I have a question for Lauren and Sarah. If they wanted to introduce themselves and ask a question of us, they can use their public comment period of time, right? Okay, so they could come and say, hey, I'm with the NAU in the project, or a professor who presented on this, and I am interested in meeting anybody after or something, I think they could they could come and make use of that time without having to agendicize it 3 weeks in advance, correct? They could just come for the next third Wednesday of the month.
And that's true for any of our commissions, that they always have an open call to the public at the beginning that like gives you 3 minutes to stand up and say, here's my name and address and why I'm here today. Staff uses that too to make little announcements and things when we're visiting other commissions. So
That's good to know. Did you have any other questions for us, or does anybody have any comments?
From my perspective, the main thing would just be sort of maybe getting one or more of you who agree that this is something that I could contact you about again, and just kind of moving forward, sort of keeping in contact about, you know, how things are going and whether the commission has the bandwidth to work with various groups. Again, most of it probably won't be until the beginning of 2026 because this is going to be for my spring class. But sort of just, you know, I guess agreeing that yes, I'll keep in contact to see if this is something that could potentially be a good partnership moving forward. Of course, with how whatever needs to change as far as the time commitment or anything like that.
Well, I would be willing to be open to be a contact. As far as like the commitment for time, I think at that time I'd have to hear like how much, like meet once a week or we meet like 3 times, or, you know, just depending on, I don't know what in early 2026 what my schedule is going to look like.
Yes.
And another option is that Taylor could reach back out to Sarah and I, because the commission also may have changed members by then. Some appointments are up in December and need to be reappointed. So we also could have new commissioners potentially. So so that another factor to consider. So you could reach back out to Sarah and we could, and I, you know, forward to the commission and see who's available and interested at that time. And then they could contact you directly. And
Yeah,
then that's
awesome.
a way of sharing instead of sharing all of the contact information now.
Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah,
suggestion.
that sounds great.
yeah, we could keep you on the like contact list with us, Vice Chair. That way it's not like a quorum. So if we respond to Taylor, we could at least copy you so you know it's like you're the one we're kind of holding us accountable that it's getting followed up on, if that's okay.
That sounds good.
I don't know when your reappointment is, if you're one of the people.
It's at the end of December, I think.
Okay, so you're in the, yeah, okay. Or you're not out of, I don't know what you're, if you're out of time or not. I never can, I haven't tracked up everybody's.
No, I don't think I am.
Okay, good. That's what I was gonna ask. I was like, yeah. So, okay. So if you're, yes, assuming you're still on the commission, we'll make you the first person we copy.
Well, I think Amy expressed interest first, so.
Do you want to be the one that we kind of loop in? Either way? Sorry.
Yeah, either way. I mean,
Okay.
that way that person may be really busy right then. Yeah.
Yeah, that all sounds great. I know I'm a little ahead on this. I'm just trying to kind of like, I'm a lot of times I don't know how long these things are going to take and how far ahead would be useful to know. So this is just the establishment of sort of that first contact. And then you said Amy is the one I can sort of keep, email again later on down the road just to kind of touch base, see how things are looking, if that's something that we can move forward with.
You'll want to reach out to Sarah.
Oh, Sarah. Okay, sorry.
As our contact for the commission.
Sarah. Thank you. Sorry. Lots of names.
And you can copy Amy, Alicia, or I'm sorry, Alicia and Amy or Lauren if you want to do that. But yeah, then we'll have a little group. It's not a group that meets the quorum requirements. So then we have a bit of there'll be some contact.
Yeah, so to clarify, if there's 4 of the commissioners that are included in an email, then it's about something that may happen on an agenda item, right? Correct, that's a quorum, and it could be violating open meeting laws. So we have to be careful of that. All right, well, thank you for coming and looking forward to hearing what some students might be proposing.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Again, thank you so much for letting me bring this to you guys and for the potential working together down the road. And I hope you have a good rest of your evening.
All right, you too. All right, the next item on the agenda is the historic signs and facades grant tracking.
Indeed. Okay, so this is, as we didn't meet last month, doing a little end of year recap and then beginning of this fiscal year recap. I'll pull up where we closed out with fiscal year 2025. We did pretty well. I did recently did 4 grant inspections, and we were able to pay 3 of them out with 2025 funds. So the only one that's rolling over from or the only 2 that are rolling over from last year to this year is the one for 61 West Cherry, which the commission approved the extension for, and then the Lumberjack Pizza at 104 East Route 66, and that they have until November 2025 to be reimbursed, because they have a year from the award date. We were just, of course, hoping to pay out as much as possible with last year's funds and then not have to carry it over. But the England House at 614 West Santa Fe, that the payment is pending, but as long as it's completed this month, which it should be, we can still use last year's funds, and everything was submitted during last fiscal year. So we're good there. So that's exciting. So even though that one says payment pending, it's still going to be with last year's money. And then the window replacement at 615 West Cherry that you approved in April is completely done and paid. And the 803.5 West Aspen is also completely closed out and paid. So that's where we wrapped up with last year's money.
So is there any money left over from last year, or did we zero out, or did we have some that
No,
couldn't roll
we
over?
did not, but it doesn't roll over, so
Right, so that
yeah.
it kind of just goes back into the city coffers, right?
Essentially, yes. So this shows 5,000, but really it's 15,000 because 10 of it is moving. We're carrying forward to this year. So we had 15,000 left from last year, but still pretty good, especially because we managed to push 3 through right at the finish line.
Nice, thank you.
And so then this, of course, was uploaded before the award tonight, but so it shows the 2 that carried over. So the 601 West Cherry is underway right now, and so they still in progress, haven't done an inspection or anything, but seems like they will be on track to complete before April 2026. And Lumberjack Pizza is complete. They just, as it's reimbursement based, the work is complete, but the owner has not paid the contractor to then turn around and submit reimbursement to us. So that's essentially what we're waiting for on that one. But as you can see, so we have 140,000 left to award for this year, less the 10,000 you awarded tonight, so 130,000. And so in the last couple months did 4 inspections, so included some photos of those. So you could see, thank you, Chrome. So this is the 803.5 West Aspen. So if you'll remember, this was doing foundation stabilization work. So some of these photos they called us to come out and actually look at what they put in to hold up the foundation, since this is one of those that you can't actually see what happened when it's final. So this is, you can look in here and see the devices that they put in, and then this is a better photo. And one little iris hanging on here. And then here's the finished when it's all done. So, and this, you can kind of tell here, I don't think that this wasn't part of this grant. This is the previous HPC approval, but one of 2 buildings and this section that was recently hit by a car that was fixed was this section right here. And here's the other one that they had to Lumberjack Pizza, replaced all of this after being hit by a car. So this is that completed project. The only other update with this one, I think it'll end up coming in a little under budget because they had scoped doing some work on the stone here in the grant application, and they ended up cutting out of the project because the owner couldn't afford it. So it was just this replacement canopy was the main thing. And then I think they did, it also included the work on the sign. So, and that one, waiting for reimbursement. And the window replacement, so the final product here. Let's see, so it's these are the originals, and then these are the replacements. What it looks like from the interior. And the last one is the England House. And this one, they're still doing some work on the project if you go by, but what's left is outside the scope of the grant. So we were able to close out the grant. What they're doing now is they're having custom windows, replacement windows fabricated by some company in Hollywood that makes things for movie sets because they couldn't find anyone locally or any closer than Hollywood who could do this. So, and someone who works for the contractor used to do that for a living and had a contact and is finding somebody. But the scope of the grant was doing the replacement foundation work for the under the back porch addition, as well as some interior and exterior painting. But the foundation work exceeded the grant amount. So we didn't even end up covering the paint. But I included photos of all of it. So, and Sarah may have updated you about this, Sarah and possibly Mark went out and looked. They had sourced some replacement stone and it didn't match well enough. And then they actually found all of this underneath the old porch. And this is the original stone that it looks a little different because it doesn't have the same patina as the rest of the building, but this is contemporary that they salvaged from the building itself. So that's really cool. So that's, yeah, underneath the back porch. And then they did do some painting work up on the eaves here. And then here's farther away shot. So the holes here where they're having all these custom windows fabricated, because of course, now that things are closer to being level, none of the old windows fit, which most of those were salvaged from other places anyways. And they were actually like chopped up from wherever they came from to fit onto this porch. So, so they're doing different things. So that's still in progress, but yeah, go ahead, Commissioner Westheimer.
Did you include photos of interior and ceilings because of painting?
And just because I got to see all of it. They did, so it is really, the only thing that the grant ended up paying for is this foundation work. But the original, because it just so far exceeded cost. But it did include interior and exterior painting, which is interesting because it was approved that way. Interior painting does not meet our grant guidelines. So luckily we didn't end up having to pay for it, but that was part of what was approved as the grant. But they had to do, they had a water leak. And so they had to fix some of the tin work and do repainting. So because the painting had been part of it, they showed me the whole thing. So that's, yeah, why the interior photos are in here. Yeah, so they've done a lot of work. And it looks great, and I can't believe what they're doing with the windows. It'll be interesting to see what they come back as, but that's the closest they could get to somebody to do custom windows is somebody in Hollywood. And my only hesitation with that is they design things for short-term lives. So I hope it all works out. But so yeah, that's that for the grant. So that's the the update for where we are at. Any questions on any of those? And
Thank you for sharing the pictures
You're
and a
welcome.
nice peek inside the England house.
yeah, right.
I'm
And
very envious of that ceiling.
yeah. Yeah, it looks really nice. And it sounds like all of this work, they ended up having to close it for a while and stop having reservations, but hopefully they're nearing the finish line.
No other comments and questions. So the next thing is reports.
Yes, and so the first is an approval. And so this is just really reporting back on the mitigation for the Los Tapatios restaurant, which I'm sure I don't need to remind you all what the mitigation was. But we have, I don't believe it's up yet, but we have approved the sign permit for, and it's very similar to what you saw before, except Los Tapatios is removed from one side. So as per the commission instructions, so this is the final design that will be going up. They did, yes.
And do you know when they're going to be open for business? Maybe because I might.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
They are open now.
It's just past where I
Yeah.
turn into my go homes, so I don't drive by it that often. Oh,
Yes, it is open. And they do have a conditional certificate of occupancy just to make sure that there's these final things for the commission, get checked off before they get the final. And then there's also a whole thing about the range hoods in the kitchen that has nothing to do with us that also has to be signed off on. And then this is the text of the plaque that I approved, and as well as Josh Edwards from Cornerstone, who wrote it on their behalf. And this is going to be installed next to the mural. It may actually already be up. I haven't received confirmation, but we approved them to fabricate it. So a few weeks ago. So hopefully it will be up soon if it isn't already. But it, ties in the postcard mural as well as talking about the restaurant. And then the last one is the mural, which Sky Black did, and it very quickly. So it's already there. And then to the right of it, like right over here in this orange part, is where the plaque is or will be installed. So.
Well, that's what I was curious about. Then I can just walk over there. It's not too far from my house and take a look at the mural.
It would be interesting to hear what kind of comments they receive from their customers about having the mural and the plaque. Like, are they interested? Do they find it interesting?
We can go as customers sometime and ask. They'd be thrilled, I'm sure, for that. Yes, as long as it's not a quorum.
Can all go.
Well, we can always advertise a quorum to have lunch together. That's a
That
different.
could be this year's holiday party.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, we could ask about that.
We could do it at the holiday party kicking off the year for 100-year anniversary of Route 66 near the mural.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
Well, so that was the approval, and then 3 consultation items. So these were all Section 106 consultation. On the first 2 are City of Flagstaff related projects where there's a lead federal agency, and then the last is a FCC project that they consulted with the city on. So the first is the Killip School Regional Detention Basin. As you all know, it's part of the flood mitigation that's been happening in that neighborhood. So there was negative class 3 pedestrian survey conducted and sent to SHPO for consultation with a finding of no historic properties affected, and concurrence has been received on that. And the Downtown Mile project, Section 106 consultation is ongoing. The revised, there were the reports were originally sent to SHPO, I believe, here in May, and there were comments from me as well as from SHPO staff. Nothing that would change the finding of no adverse effect, but just kind of tightening up the documentation of what's there. So also a negative archaeological pedestrian survey, but there's obviously built environment resources in the vicinity of the Downtown Mile project, and none of them will be directly affected, and so the finding of no adverse effects considered indirect effects to the buildings, and SHPO has concurred with that, and the revised reports are out for review right now. And the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration, is the lead federal agency for this project.
Commissioner Westheimer, you had a question?
Oh, could you explain what you mean by the pedestrian? Now I can't remember the wording because it's late.
Sure, yeah, an archaeological survey, like a ground survey that are, yeah.
With pedestrians walking.
Yes. Yeah,
And negative means they found nothing.
correct, yeah. I believe the SHPO comment on that one was, do they even really need to do that survey? Yeah. And then this last one is a new standard monopine tower at Puente Elementary School, which we received a notice from FCC inviting us to comment and did not have comments on the project. And then FCC notified me that they received SHPO concurrence. So that is that for Section 106 consultation status. Any questions on that?
No, not for me. Thank you. And then, did you have a comment? The next item on our agenda is miscellaneous items to and from commission members. So I had mentioned earlier about talking about a miscellaneous item later. And how does everyone feel about asking for agendizing the process so we understand a little bit better? Obviously, you gathered that we are confused a little bit of if with the site plan, development plan, conceptual plan, so on and so forth.
I just want to point out, it was part of everyone's training when they came on that videos I sent you
Yeah, but it's
forever
like Greek,
ago. I know. It's
so
been
like a
lot.
little bit stuck.
Yeah, I know.
Have to
But
learn more.
but I just want to point out that is part of the videos I send everyone when they're onboarded. But I know like it doesn't mean anything until you have to apply it. And so
Mhm.
it's fine to like go back through it again and explain why and how. And I think what I heard was maybe we can do some things like show you the application, and maybe it might be worthwhile to go over the application
What
like and show you what's on it.
Or maybe resend the videos and then we can come with questions, clarifying questions or something like that.
Right. Like what did we not cover when we did the training on it that we need to cover? And that could make it a shorter work session for
Yeah,
sure.
or just like, hey, this is the process, but like there's always like the wrinkles, like, hey, this is something that doesn't fit, or like, yeah, something like that.
Right.
And actually, watching the videos and then going through maybe the process and asking some questions and things. If we had a basic, like show us the forms and give us an example, not a really complex one, maybe, or some of the steps and go through that, then that might give us a little more concrete material and context to stick. Part of it is we meet once a month and not always every month. And so it's kind of hard. It's not day to day. It's a whole nother language. And very different from what I do in work. It's not a language we use.
Yeah, and I watched the videos before I was on the commission and didn't really know what I was doing when I was watching the videos. So yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. I'll pull those together and make sure we can talk about it because we've sent an onboarding email in the last year. So that's easy enough to go back and look at. But yeah, maybe when we send it, you could individually reply to just me and Lauren and say, I've watched the video and here are my questions.
Okay.
And then we could agendize it. I'd give you more time to do that. And then we could agendize it in like September.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I just lost my thought. And Abby has given thumbs up that she also agrees. I did see the thumb. It gets bigger than the hand, which I don't really see for that screen over there because the hand up is not here. So I realize now why Emily sits like this, so she can see one screen. So I didn't realize that earlier on in the meeting. I think understanding the process also may make us more efficient because a lot of what we were asking was process because we're a little bit confused.
And this is different. There is no previous example of this exact case. So
No, it's been years since we've had a case that went through both the certificate and the overlay process. Like the certificate and the CRS process, those don't get combined all the time. And there's times where they get combined in the opposite way. Like there's
Right.
been certificates that required a report as one of the mitigations. And like it's always a little bit different depending on how it's done.
And understanding the process also gives us a better understanding of what we're able to do as a commission. It's kind of, and also like some ideas to come up with. When like Amy brought up that, see plaques or, photos put someplace, an interpretive media or something, but if we knew more of what we could do, maybe we ourselves could suggest some more creative things that maybe more appropriate. Like if we had a bigger tool set that we understood our limitations, we could present things that would be appropriate for that particular resource each time. Just the more you know, the more you can, do to help mitigate the effects.
And I mean, yeah, that's not exactly, formalized anywhere. That could be another Ariana training, is coming up with different non-standard mitigation options.
Yeah.
And would probably need to be like a, review of other commissions and what sorts of things they're requiring. Because per the code, it's basically just a phase 2. That's what our code is set up, and which is the standard, like that HABS here is the national standard for documentation for buildings or the built environment, bridges and everything as well. So it follows that, but if you're looking for more creative solutions, I think we would need to look outside the box and the code. And get some examples, and it would, especially from others, as Sarah alluded to before, some of the trouble is actually implementing them, and both having like the teeth to make sure that they do get implemented, and there are checks that tie into the city process to make sure that we have a chance to make sure they're implemented, and that they're realistic things, like such as like, finding out actually we couldn't salvage any of the stone. So how could we adapt to meet that situation?
Right. And I think it's just important to remember that just because the cultural resource study process only lets you get to the point where maybe you can require a plaque, that's exactly what we required for the May Hicks house. We required a full HABS hair recordation and a plaque on the new building, but we got to keep the building. Like it's not always, I mean, that's not something like that the city can do for every building, but we're doing it for the May Hicks house. And, council just approved kind of taking extraordinary measures for the Orpheum so that that's a preserved building.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that what the code can do is not the end of what can be done sometimes. But you are a body that's got an authority within the code and you can implement it, which actually makes you much more powerful than a lot of other commissions because you're a decision-making commission. You're not just advising, but the downside of being a decision-making commission is you've really got to stay in the lane of your decision-making authority when you're sitting in that public hearing seat. So there's wins and losses to that. I mean, I think though it's not as dire as I think it feels sometimes, but it does feel like some buildings are going to be demolished. It's not something we can always prevent, but there's wins and losses in that. And I think that if you look at it as like a tick sheet of like how many we lost, it can feel really bad, but it can also be like, but there's a lot of things gained and a lot of things moving forward. you know, we always prefer that our